Chapter 1816. Baiyuan was a strange country. Baiyuan was able to establish a country because of a very dramatic reason. Different from Dongqing, Zhongzhou, Nansheng, and Xichang countries, although the aristocrats were powerful, the royal family always restrained their growth and tried various ways to weaken them. Baiyuan was different. Not only did they allow the aristocrats to grow, but they also foolishly passed a system that was extremely beneficial to the aristocrats. The aristocrats' official position was passed down from generation to generation. To ensure the interests of the aristocrats, they also stipulated that the aristocrats could not be killed unless they committed treason or regicide. With such a guarantee, the development of the aristocrats in Baiyuan could be described as a blowout. As long as a man was born in an aristocratic family, he would be able to enter the officialdom and obtain an official position after he reached adulthood. As a result, all the positions with real power and benefits were occupied by the aristocratic families. The royal family became a human-shaped stamp machine, and their right to speak in politics was frighteningly weak. Some aristocrats tried their best to have children in order to expand their family's influence. As long as the family could afford it, they would be willing to die. Anyway, when the children grew up, they would definitely become officials. Even if it was a small official, there would be a qualitative change when there were a lot of them. With this idea, after decades of development in Baiyuan, the group of aristocrats had expanded to a terrible number. This also affected the inheritance rights and interests of the lineal descendants, so there was a clear distinction between legitimate children and illegitimate children. Legitimate children were certainly noble, while illegitimate children were a little higher than commoners, but they were servants and slaves in front of legitimate children. Baiyuan was like a dynasty that was adjusted at an accelerated speed. After only a few decades of establishment, serious land annexation problems were exposed. The interest groups led by the aristocrats were insatiable. They ate too much and the country could not collect taxes, causing the national treasury to be empty and the country to be poor. There was a widely spread saying in Baiyuan, the emperor was just a broken doll that the aristocrats could play with at will. Indeed, the aristocrats led by the Yi family in Baiyuan took turns to govern and stage coups. Baiyuan had never been peaceful. It was said that there were as many as 20 coups in a year, and the shortest regime lasted only half a day. It was equivalent to XX force just getting rid of the enemy force, and before they could be proud of it for a few hours, the latecomers secretly stole their heads. The people of Baiyuan were also miserable. In 5 years, the currency was changed 6 times and the measurement units were changed 4 times. The worst part was that the XX faction had just issued some sort of order, and the people below were busy implementing it. After 4 or 5 months, there was still no effect, and the XX faction had taken over again. The AA faction overturned all of their predecessors' arrangements and brought out their own original works. The people of the North Abyss, in his heart, he wanted to curse at these idiots 10,000 times. With great difficulty, the largest aristocratic family of Baiyuan, the Yi family, stood out from the various factional struggles and pushed the royal family to wear their own dragon robes. The people finally heaved a sigh of relief. Just when they hoped that the new emperor would be smarter and not cause trouble again, these people broke the bottom line again. The first thing Haozi did after ascending to the throne was to confer the title of king to every direct descendant of the Yi family. This was a hereditary title, and their salaries were of the highest class. For a moment, he was proud of himself. Smiley face angle, the higher-ups had also said that in order to fight for more authority in the court, the landowning households had fought hard to survive. Even though they had beaten the bastard children into low-class people, the number of direct descendants was still very large. According to a later world record, the patriarch of XX aristocratic family in the North Abyss had a total of 369 wives in his lifetime. All year round, he slept with 1 wife a day, and the other 4 had to wait. The number of children was even more horrifying. 412 sons and 398 daughters. Smiley face angle, in order to increase the number of so-called legitimate children, they could have 9 wives at the same time and unlimited concubines. Although the Yi family was not so horrifying, there were still more than 100 direct descendants of the Yi family. In other words, in a place with a small population like the North Abyss, there were more than 100 hereditary titles of king all at once. How could the national treasury afford the highest salary for every king? After receiving half a year's salary, they were so poor that they only had their underwear. In order to appease them, the new royal family of the North Abyss could only think of ways to squeeze more money from the people. What? Reduce the king's salary and remove their titles? No way, they were all from the E family and held great power. If they were angered, they would lose their heads in the middle of the night. Smiley face angle, anyway, the people were just ants. Why would ants need people to have such a big appetite? Cut. The money in the people's pockets was like a sponge that could still be squeezed. The North Abyss was located in the north. It was only warm for a few months a year, and the rest of the year was very cold. The environment was harsh, and it was not easy for crops to survive. The land produced little food. In order to stabilize the national situation, the agricultural tax could not be high. Even if the government only collected 20%, the people had to scrimp for a whole year to feed their families. However, in order to appease the kings, the E family repeatedly raised taxes on the people and added complicated tax items to increase the national treasury's income. When the tax was at its heaviest, the government collected 90% of the agricultural tax, and the remaining 10% of the grain tax had to be exploited. Within the North Abyss, countless people froze and starved to death. During the years when Jiangpengji was at war, the North Abyss had coveted the fat meat of Dongqing. They had also heard of how rich and prosperous Wanzhou was and dreamed of taking it for themselves. But the North Abyss was so chaotic. Where did they get the financial resources, equipment, and military supplies? The soldiers of the day were just poor people who had sneaked in to get some hot porridge. The real elites were the private soldiers of the gentry, the minions of the evil spirits in the eyes of the people, and the North Abyss still wanted to squeeze out troops to expand and invade her rear? Jiangpengji only gave them 2 words, haha. Before the E family came to power, the barren North Abyss could still gather more than 100,000 decent troops, which gave Jiangpengji a certain amount of pressure. This was also why she asked Qiguan Rang to hold back his troops to prevent the North Abyss from jumping out and stirring things up. Now that the E family had been in power for almost 2 years, the entire North Abyss was like a broken doll. Jiangpengji really thought highly of the North Abyss by bringing 250,000 troops. TSK, outsiders thought that Jiangpengji was using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. Only Qiguan Rang knew that she brought so many troops to kill all the gentry in the North Abyss. Among the 5 countries in the world, the number of gentry in the other 4 countries added up was less than the number of gentry in the North Abyss. The gentry in the North Abyss were especially superstitious about bloodlines. The deformed N kinds of privilege theory of the gentry was deeply rooted in their bones. A group of malignant tumors. If she really absorbed it, she was afraid that she would get cancer. When Fengzhen told her that they had captured more than 100 refugees from the North Abyss, she was deep in thought. Qiguan Rang said, actually, there were refugees who flocked to Shui City before, but I made the decision to expel them. Jiangpengji smiled and said, what if they couldn't? Qiguan Rang said, give them dry rations and send soldiers to send them away. If they are still stubborn, kill them as an example to others. If not, kill them all. Although the refugees from the North Abyss were pitiful, they couldn't allow them to enter their territory and threaten the lives of the people there. When Qiguan Rang arrived at the border, he heard that many refugees from the North Abyss had robbed the local people of their money and rations, killed people, and raped them. These people couldn't be allowed to live. As for those who hadn't escaped in time, he was much gentler. He mainly drove them away and killed them when they couldn't escape. If it were anyone else, they would probably be scolded to death, but Qiguan Rang never cared about such things for the sake of the overall situation. He wouldn't be soft-hearted to the people of the enemy country and put his own people in danger. Similarly, he didn't have to be soft-hearted to this group of people who had crossed the border. However, Fengzhen said, it's just. My lord, one of them claims to be your old friend. Jiangpengji asked, what's his name? Fengzhen answered, Ma Xiu. An image of a somewhat quiet but clear-eyed youth immediately appeared in Jiangpengji's mind. The acquaintance from the Langi Academy was indeed an old friend. I remember Xiaoyin saying that the fertile fields of Ma Xiu's family were occupied and plundered by bandits. In order to avoid disaster, he had no choice but to move his family north. There had been no news of him for many years. It never occurred to her that he had gone to the North Abyss to avoid disaster. Chapter 18:17. Avoid disaster? Go north with his family? Going to Beiyuan to avoid disaster, that's also. Why didn't he look for you back then? No matter what, he could at least protect you. When Fengzhen said this, it was obvious that a well-fed man did not know the hunger of a starving man. Jiang Pengji said helplessly, Nanxing was in chaos. After the Nanman disaster, the flames of war spread throughout Nanxing. Jiqing obviously couldn't go to Nanxing. To go to Zhongzhou, he would have to pass through the territories of several feudal lords and there would be countless bandits along the way. Whether he could reach Zhongzhou alive is still a problem. After thinking about it, Beiyuan is the only way out. Even if life is hard, he won't die under the knives and swords of the bandits. Ma Xiu's family was well off. They had a lot of fertile land and could be considered a wealthy landlord. Even if he didn't have any prospects for the rest of his life, he could still live comfortably. He belonged to a poor family and was considered well off. However, what was the use of having fertile land? When the world was in chaos, how many people would fish in troubled waters to burn, kill, and loot? Small wealthy families like Ma Xiu, who had some property but could not protect themselves, were the favorite fat sheep of the bandits. The profits were high and the risks were low. They could live comfortably for a while with just one job. Ma Xiu had no choice but to pack his luggage and flee north. It was expected. Fengzhen heard the displeasure in Jiang Pengji's voice and chose to shut up with a strong desire to live. Qiguan Rang discreetly glanced at Fengzhen. How old was this wastrel already? Even now, he still had a big mouth. No matter how well Ma Xiu was doing or why he chose to go north to avoid disaster instead of relying on the Lord. He was still the Lord's classmate and close friend when they were young. Not to mention how to respect and take care of him, he couldn't kick him when he was down or ridicule him. Of course, Qiguan Rang also believed that his lord wouldn't care about Fengzhen's slip of the tongue because of Ma Xiu. However, it was better to avoid such incidents. The harmony between the ruler and the minister was the result of both parties working together. Feng Lungzi should learn from this. Jiang Pengji said, why didn't he look for me? Maybe he didn't want trouble. His personality has always been like this. Ma Xiu, courtesy named Jiqing. He studied at Langi Academy when he was young. He was one of Jiang Pengji's best classmates. Compared to the others, Ma Xiu did not have a high presence among the five of them. Most of the time, he was just passively joining in on the fun. His personality was rather taciturn. As long as he felt that he could solve the problem by himself, he would definitely not trouble people he was familiar with. Calculating the time, when Ma Xiu went north to seek refuge, Jiang Pengji had just taken over Xiangyang district. It was the most difficult period in the beginning. Internally, they were poor. Their simple and crude team was like a grassroots team. Externally, they had countless battles to fight, fighting this and that. In the early years, if she wasn't the one fighting others, others would take the initiative to pick a fight with her. She was still the one being looked down upon. Under such circumstances, with Ma Xiu's neutral character, he naturally avoided it. He did not want to cause trouble for Jiang Pengji, nor did he want to take any risks. From today's perspective, it was Ma Xiu's loss that he didn't choose to help Jiang Pengji. Otherwise, he would definitely be one of the important ministers. But who could say that Ma Xiu's choice was wrong based on the situation at that time? No one can. It wasn't just Ma Xiu. Most people would have made the same choice if they were in that situation. The only thing they didn't understand was, Jiang Pengji had pacified Dongqing for so many years. Hadn't Ma Xiu heard the news? The situation in Beiyuan was not chaotic. There were no wars everywhere, but the number of people who starved or froze to death was no less than in the chaos of war. It wasn't until Jiang Pengji led her troops to Shuai city and pointed her sword at Beiyuan that Ma Xiu fled. This was somewhat thought-provoking. Qiguan Rang and Fengzhen obviously thought of this, but the latter had just been unlucky, so Qiguan Rang could only speak. My lord, do you suspect that Ma Xiu might be a spy sent by Beiyuan? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, Jiqing likes to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. He is cautious and careful, but he is not stupid. What's the use of him being a pawn for Beiyuan? How long can Beiyuan resist me in this state? In the end, is Beiyuan more likely to win or me? He was very clear about these questions. Even if he is really a spy from Beiyuan, he came here to surrender to me and then stab Beiyuan in the back. Qiguan Rang shook his head in disagreement. It makes sense, but my lord must not believe it easily. Ma Xiu has sneaked into the refugees and fled here. The timing is somewhat coincidental. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, I know. I will understand these worries when I see him. Smart people like to complicate things, even Jiang Pengji was no exception. When she really saw Ma Xiu, her previous conspiracy theories and speculations disappeared like smoke in thin air. She could only sigh. Jiqing. When Ma Xiu was brought to meet her, Jiang Pengji looked at his face for a long time, but she still could not find traces of the past on his old and tired face. She only felt a lump in her throat and could not speak for a long time. Ma Xiu was not the oldest among the five, but he looked no different from an old man in his 70s. There was not much black in his messy hair, it was all white. Not only was his hair white, but the skin on his face was wrinkled and dry. There were also frostbite cracks left by years of cold. He took 2 steps forward on the ground, slowly bent down and gave a deep bow. It was obvious that he wanted to be as standard as possible, but his red and swollen hands and weak legs were trembling uncontrollably. Jiang Pengji suddenly stood up and supported him. His arms were so thin that only skin and bones were left. She did not dare to use any strength. I haven't seen you for more than 10 years. How are you, Lanting? Ma Xiu smiled weakly. His voice was old and hoarse like an old man's. His familiar tone made Jiang Pengji feel a sense of familiarity. Lanting. Maybe you are the only one who still calls me that. Jiang Pengji could not help but smile bitterly. The whole world knew that she had changed her name. She did not expect that Ma Xiu, who was hiding in Beiyuan to avoid trouble, did not hear the news and still called her by her old name. Ma Xiu's old face showed a bit of awkwardness. As a commoner, it is indeed disrespectful to call the emperor by his name, Jiang Pengji said. No, I gave up that name because, some complicated reasons. It is not because of my identity. Ma Xiu did not ask for details. He chose to remain silent like he did in the past. Lu Jing rushed over when he heard the news. When he saw the old man in the hall, he could not recognize him as Ma Xiu. Ma Xiu was only 7 or 8 years older than Jiang Pengji, but they looked more like grandfather and grandson. What had Ma Xiu experienced all these years? You are Shaoyin? Ma Xiu carefully recognized Lu Jing a few times, but the latter stood a little far away. His eyes were not good, so he could not see clearly. It took him a while to recognize him. Yes. Chapter 1818. Ma Xiu was not only a refugee but also a fugitive slave. When they heard him narrate the story in a calm tone, Jiang Pengji and Lu Jing both felt a surge of suppressed anger. Back then, Ma Xiu did flee to the relatively stable North Abyss to avoid trouble. But he didn't expect that compared to the bloody chaos, the Beiyuan was more painful to kill people. When Ma Xiu and his family fled, they brought money with them. He also knew that one should not show one's wealth, so he was careful all the way and did not attract covetous eyes. After arriving at the Beiyuan, trouble came one after another. Ma Xiu was a commoner, and the status of commoners in the Beiyuan was much lower than what was rumored. At that time, there were many commoners in Dongqing who fled to the Beiyuan to avoid trouble like Ma Xiu. The Beiyuan government treated them like animals. Corvée labor was the heaviest, and taxes were the most numerous. People were almost exploited to death. When Mushio realized the situation in the Beiyuan and wanted to leave, there was a coup in the court of the Beiyuan. The faction that came to power through the coup was harsher to the commoners and fugitives. If they could not collect taxes, they were directly banished to lowly status and sold. Some scholars from poor families in the Beiyuan were angry and tried to reason with them, but they ended up with their arms and legs being pinched and blood flowing. Mushio and his family's savings could not withstand such exploitation, so they naturally found a way to leave. However, it was a wolf's den. It was easy to enter but difficult to leave. The population of the Beiyuan was the smallest among the 5 countries. The people who left the country were strictly controlled. Later on, anyone who left would be beaten to death. Mushio could only restrain himself and look for opportunities. At this time, a disaster fell from the sky and hit him head-on. In order to resist the faction that came to power, a group of knowledgeable people gathered and called themselves the New Faction. They planned to use the coup and assassination method to make the old faction step down. As a result, they were discovered by the leader of the old faction before they took action. They took the initiative and wiped out the New Faction. It was not accurate to say wiped out because there was a fish that escaped the net. The fish that escaped the net swam to the back door of Mushio's house and fell in the snow. He was rescued by his wife who went out to buy goods. The old faction came to the door, and Mushio and his family were arrested for harboring criminals. Their property was confiscated and they were banished to lowly status. Mushio became a handyman in the backyard of the Beiyuan aristocrats. His wife and daughter were taken away and sold to brothels. His son was sold cheaply. The wife blamed herself and committed suicide by ramming herself against a pillar. Her daughter left behind a child of an unknown benefactor, who died of an illness in a dark alley. His youngest son, on the other hand, was beheaded by the bloodthirsty E-clan private soldiers during the E-clan's forced abdication. Mushio was sold again and again with his young granddaughter. In the end, he became a veteran guard of a small town near the border. Hearing that the enemy was going to attack, Mushio packed his luggage and followed the refugees to Snow City on foot. Before coming here, Mushio was actually prepared to die. On the way, he had heard about Chiguan Rang's ruthless killing of the refugees. He knew that his decision was the right one. He also knew that he would die if he tried to force his way in. But, considering that he was once a citizen of Dongqing, he did not wish for his remains to be returned to his homeland. He only hoped that his granddaughter could be pitted. She could be adopted by someone or bought. If that was not possible, she could accompany him to be buried under the walls of Snow City, which was the closest city to Dongqing. Refugees like them had to walk on their feet. Mushio was still all right. At the very least, he had a pair of old shoes that he had taken off someone's body. There were also many people who were barefoot. Before they reached Snow City, they were discovered by the patrolling cavalry scouts and all of them were captured. They thought they were going to die, but they did not expect the soldiers to let them take their rations. They told them to go back to where they came from and not to think about sneaking into Dongqing. Mushio heard the refugees around him hugging their heads and crying. He also learned the identity of the enemy's leader from some of the refugees. In a trance, he felt as if he had encountered a glimmer of hope when he was at the end of his rope. Grandpa? His granddaughter was very skinny. Her head was big and her body was small. Every time he saw her like that, he was worried that she would break her neck. Mushio said, "Don't worry. Grandpa has an idea." Although he said that, he was not confident at all. Even so, he was still determined to meet Jiang Pengji and told her his name. No one thought that Mushio, the old man, had anything to do with the master of the world. Even Mushio himself felt enlightened. When he was young, he really knew such a person. Or, those memories of his youth were just a daydream of this old man? When he waited anxiously and was summoned to see Jiang Pengji, it was as if time had turned back. He not only saw the dignified female vassal in front of him, but also the young man in red who was laughing and cursing in Langya County. They were two completely different scenes, but at that moment, they overlapped in front of his eyes. They fit together perfectly, regardless of the person or the scene. Time flies. Time treats me like snow and knives, but you are still a young man in fresh clothes. When he told these things, Ma Xiu's turbid eyes did not have a trace of emotion. It was not the calmness after experiencing snow and wind, but a lifeless silence. Jiang Pengji sent people to help Ma Xiu settle down and sent a doctor to take his pulse. Ma Xiu smiled and thanked her. The doctor took his pulse, prescribed medicine, and replied to Jiang Pengji. He is like a lamp that has run out of oil. If we use precious medicine to keep him alive, he will only have a few months left. Doctors could cure stubborn diseases, but they could not save a person who was at the end of his life. The only thing Jiang Pengji could do was to let Ma Xiu live a better life in his last days and live a little longer. Her hand that was correcting official documents paused. The ink dripped and black dots appeared. How much longer can he live? The doctor said, late spring and early summer next year. Jiang Pengji waved her hand. You may leave. I understand. Today's streaming room was very quiet. The naughty salted fish did not say anything flirtatious. Qiguan Rang asked her, what is my lord thinking about? She slowly whispered, late spring and early summer next year, will the world be united? In another place, Ma Xiu and Lu Zheng were looking at each other silently. Ma Xiu's granddaughter was holding a fragrant and soft meat patty and chewing it slowly. Everyone has their own fate. It's just fate. Why does Xiaoyin look so sad? Lu Zheng laughed at himself. I'm usually cold and hard, but I seem to be especially sad today. Ma Xiu smiled. Today is a rare day of celebration for me in the past 10 years. It was naturally a joyous occasion to find someone to entrust his orphan to before he died. Lu Zheng wanted to say something to comfort him, but he could not say anything when it came to his mouth. Reminiscing about the past was even more nonsensical. For Ma Xiu, who had suffered in the first half of his life, the more beautiful his youth was, the more miserable and painful the second half of his life was. If the two of them really wanted to reminisce about the past, they would only be rubbing salt on Ma Xiu's wounds. If anything happens to you, I will definitely treat this child as my own. Ma Xiu was not pretentious. He waved at the child. The child hesitantly put down the meat patty and sat down beside Ma Xiu's bed. Ma Xiu made a rare joke. In the future, he will be your fake father. Lu Zheng's face darkened. He corrected, it's grandfather. He adopted Ma Xiu's granddaughter as his adopted daughter. He was one generation lower than Ma Xiu for no reason. Chapter 18-19. Ma Xiu couldn't help but say as he looked at his timid granddaughter who was taken away by the servants to rest. She's a poor child. Lu Zheng said, bitterness comes after sweetness. Ma Xiu froze for a moment and laughed. You're thinking the same thing as me. Do you know what nickname I gave her? Lu Zheng didn't know. Ma Xiu replied, Oil Orange. Oil Orange? Ma Xiu nodded. Yes, oil orange. Eating it for a long time will make the body light and prolong life. It's bitter before sweet. It suits her. Oil orange blossoms in spring and produces fruit in summer. Every mid-autumn, late summer, and early autumn, oil orange fruits fill the branches and leaves. It's also resistant to drought and barrenness. It's very adaptable and can be found in some mountains in the south. The fruit tastes slightly bitter before sweet. Lu Zheng understood Ma Xiu's meaning. After a few moments of silence, he asked, what's her name? I haven't given it yet. In a place like Beiyuan, a child like her doesn't need a name. It's good enough to have a humble name. Ma Xiu was still smiling, but his smile did not reach his eyes. His eyes were cloudy and lifeless. Smiling was just a habit that he had formed for the sake of living. Seeing Lu Zheng's heavy heart, Ma Xiu thought for a while and said, I'll think of another one later. Oil Orange was just a nickname he had given her, but she couldn't bear such a nickname in the future. Lu Zheng said, yes, I'll give you one. If you don't, I'll decide when I adopt her in the future. Ma Xiu smiled faintly and said nothing. Lu Zheng was also a top student in Lanyi Academy. It was the child's fortune to have a name with his talent. The two of them were silent for a long time. Just as Lu Zheng was about to suspect that Ma Xiu had fallen asleep, the latter suddenly talked about the past. "I've been dreaming about my youth these days. Besides you and Lanting, how's Buku and Ben?" Ma Xiu hadn't mentioned these names for many years. Talking about them after so many years, he found them so familiar. Buku referred to Fang Ji and Ben referred to Jiang Imo. Buku used to be in Nanxing. Later, he couldn't live in seclusion anymore, so he went north to Wanzhou to find Master Yuanjing. He found a teaching job at the Golden Scale Academy. Now, his days are pretty leisurely. Lu Jing spoke of his old friend's current situation and sighed. "Actually, perhaps you don't know this, but the Lord supports the poor, so he has some discord with the aristocratic families. It's just that these discord haven't been brought to the surface. I was born into a landowning household, so I could still do whatever I wanted in the early years. However, my parents would eventually grow old, and the burden of the family still fell on me. In the end, we still drifted apart. On one side was his childhood friend, and on the other side was his family's stubborn and conservative stance. Jiang Imo didn't have the ability to stake everything on one throw. After so many years, Jiang Imo had also changed from a chinibu who only loved 2D paper dolls to a shrewd clan leader. A few months ago, Lu Zheng had gone to congratulate Jiang Mo's eldest grandson on his 1-month-old birthday. Jiang Imo was so happy that he drank too much. When he was drunk, he hugged Lu Zheng to suppress his sobs and complained about his troubles. He wanted to stay in his teens forever so that he wouldn't have to bear the pressure of his family and the outside world. He also didn't have to go against his will to do things that he didn't like, and he didn't have to become the kind of person he hated the most when he was young. Lu Zheng didn't know how to comfort him. When he woke up the next day, Jiang Imo acted as if nothing had happened. It was as if he couldn't remember what he had said when he was drunk. "Xiaoyin, do you think Lu Lanting will kill me if I cross her bottom line?" Lu Zheng thought about it seriously and answered, "If she still has some feelings for me, she will do it herself." Jiang Imo laughed and cried at the same time. After a long time, he waved his hand and said tiredly, "You're right. I just hope that day doesn't come." Lu Zheng stopped thinking, but his heart was still heavy. At this moment, he heard Ma Xiu say, "So, among the 5 of us, only Lanting hasn't changed." Lu Zheng said, "A person with a strong heart is not easily swayed by external factors. If she didn't have such a strong heart, she wouldn't have reached her current position." Ma Xiu had a long dream that night, not knowing if it was because what he thought about during the day would lead to his dreams at night. This was also the most peaceful sleep he had in years. He dreamt of Langjia County's green mountains and clear waters. Jiang Imo, who still had some baby fat on his face, was fishing by a stream. The scorching sun above his head made him listless, and Fang Ji was yawning beside him. Lu Zheng and Fang Ji were discussing how to make the fire burn brighter. At this moment, Jiang Imo complained. "Why is Lanting in the future? The fish that we caught are starving." Ma Xiu laughed. "He's still young and likes to sleep in. Didn't you slack off when you were his age?" Jiang Mo's face turned red with anger. "How can I slack off until late in the morning?" As they spoke, they heard the sound of hooves approaching from the other side of the river. A figure in red and white rushed out of the dense forest on the other side of the river. Lu Shi was dressed in a red robe, riding on the back of a tall white horse. He urged the white horse to leap across the narrow stream and landed not far from them. Jiang Imo was startled by the movement. The fish that had bitten the bait had escaped, and he angrily threw his fishing rod into the river. "Lu Lanting." "Nay." Lu Shi grabbed the reins and steadied the white horse. He then jumped off the horse and grabbed a few rabbits that were hanging on its back. "Do you think that you can compensate me for my fish just because you hunted a few small animals?" Lu Shi crossed his arms in front of his chest. "It's a toy that Mr. X keeps in his backyard. I stole it." That bastard seemed to be the one who had embarrassed Jiang Imo a few days ago. He said that Jiang Imo was obsessed with the fire-repelling painting and did not know the beauty of a real person. If Lu Shi found out that he had stolen the rabbits that he had been raising for a long time, he would be so angry that he would cry. Jiang Imo laughed when he heard this, but the others frowned. No matter how much he hated Lu Shi, he could not steal. If he acted recklessly now, he would get into big trouble in the future. After being lectured by Lu Zheng, Feng Ji, and Ma Xiu, Lu Shi could only admit that she had hunted the rabbits. If you hunted them, why did you say that you stole them? Lu Shi smiled maliciously. I was just trying to make you happy. Jiang Mo was infuriated. Lu Shi. Next was the barbecue. None of them were good at barbecuing, but Jiang Mo had to swallow his own. When Lu Shi was not paying attention, Jiang Mo pushed him into the water. He ended up getting himself drenched in the water. You're the bane of me. Lu Shi laughed. Not only am I the bane of you now, but I'll make sure that you won't be able to make a comeback in the future. Jiang Mo gritted his teeth in anger. Remember this when you enter the imperial court in the future. I will. I won't forget it even if I die. Ma Xiu could only play the peacemaker and persuade the two of them to stop fighting. Grandpa. Grandpa, Ma Xiu slowly opened his eyes when he heard his granddaughter's voice. He was stunned when he saw the beams on the roof. What time is it now? Ma Xiu had not slept so soundly in a long time. When he woke up, he did not know what time it was. His granddaughter said, "It's time for lunch. It's already late in the morning." Chapter 18-20. The weather in Beiyuan is too cold. It's only the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. The capital city of Beiyuan has been covered in snow for 2 months. The snow in Shui City has reached its ankles. Although our soldiers are not afraid of the cold and heat, the weather is bad and it's not suitable to fight. I think, since the aristocrats of Beiyuan have created such good psychological conditions for us, why not use this as a breakthrough? Now Beiyuan is a dam in danger. We only need to find their weakest point and give them a fatal blow. Even if we don't do anything, they will collapse on their own. The first step was to attack conspiracies, then to attack friends, then to attack soldiers, and finally to attack the city. If they could conquer Beiyuan with the least loss of public opinion, why would Jiang Pengji let the soldiers take the risk and send troops? The weather conditions in Beiyuan were too bad. Even if the soldiers of Beiyuan were vulnerable, they had lived here all year round and were far more adaptable to the climate than them. Jiang Pengji was fighting in an away game. Of course, she was at a disadvantage in terms of water and soil. If the soldiers caused a widespread epidemic because of physical discomfort, it would give the enemy a chance to fight back. Not to mention whether the enemy could seize the opportunity, Jiang Pengji should not have made such a fatal mistake. Qiguan Rang said, "My lord and I have the same idea, but," Jiang Pengji asked, "But what?" Qiguan Rang made a gesture of apology. Before Jiang Pengji arrived, he was too ruthless in dealing with the refugees of Beiyuan. If Beiyuan used this to bewitch the people and make them want to fight to the death. Even if the possibility was small, it was Qiguan Rang who gave the enemy something to use against him. Jiang Pengji exempted him from apologizing. How can you be blamed for this? You did nothing wrong. If it were me, I wouldn't have done it better than you. Qiguan Rang did not kill all the refugees as soon as he arrived. The refugees who committed the crime for the first time were all given dry food and persuaded. If this was considered ruthless, what else could Jiang Pengji say? She said, "Wenjing, why don't you listen to my plan?" Qiguan Rang listened attentively and said respectfully, "My lord, please speak." Jiang Pengji tapped her finger on the table. "Last night, I sent someone to ask the people of Beiyuan who fled with Jiqing. Most of them had the impression of war, death, plague, and barrenness about Dongqing and the other 3 countries. They were extremely certain. Ma Xiu was not fooled. He was also one of the few people who believed that the situation in Dongqing was stable, but he was not sure to what extent. Qiguan Rang said, "This is exactly what I want to tell you, my lord." In order to prevent the people from escaping through the border, Beiyuan not only strictly guards the border and cruelly kills the people who try to escape, but also sends people to fool the people from time to time and publicize some groundless human tragedies, Jiang Pengji sneered. For example, I killed a lot of people, exploited and oppressed the people, and made the land barren and full of bones? Qi Guanrang said helplessly, the words that they spread are much harsher than the Lord's. They also fabricate more false content. Killing people was still considered polite. Cannibalism, eating children, bathing in women's blood to maintain beauty, kidnapping pregnant women to perform a C-section for fun, and having 3,000 beautiful men and 3,000 beautiful women, with no taboo between men and women, engaging in open-air nude debauchery. All in all, it seemed that his lord wanted a copy of everything that King Zhou, who had been slandered like a dog, had done in the investiture of the gods. Not only did she have to copy, but she also had to come up with new ideas, and new ideas had to be innovated. In short, she had to be as slandered as possible. Qi Guanrang deeply suspected that the people in Beiyuan who were engaged in the internet water army were fans of the investiture of the gods. While they eagerly followed the story of Wanzhou, they racked their brains to frame their lord, saying that the world was a big melting pot. Only in this way would the people know fear and continue to endure the hellish days on earth. Look, the world outside Beiyuan was like that. You would regret it if you went there. It was better to stay in Beiyuan. Although Beiyuan couldn't let you eat your fill, it could let you drag out an ignoble existence. As one of the targets of slander, Qi Guanrang only wanted to smash the heads of these idiots. How could they slander his lord? When Qi Guanrang first saw this information, he had secretly thought about capturing them in the future and cutting off their dog paws with a knife. That's all they can do. Otherwise, they wouldn't have tormented Beiyuan like this. Jiang Pengji sneered. They say that I'm muddle-headed, tyrannical, and repulsive, but there are still people who can't bear it and take the risk to flee. It shows how much they've gone overboard. Qi Guanrang gently waved his feather fan and smiled. His thoughts were the same as his lord's. Another official asked, My lord, do you want the people of Beiyuan to know the real Dongqing? Jiang Pengji said, if we don't let them know how good the people of Dongqing are living, how will they know that they've been fooled? The more the aristocrats of Beiyuan squeeze the people, the stronger the backlash. But, if the people flee here one after another, should we accept them or not? Whether they accept them or not, it didn't seem right. Jiang Pengji said matter-of-factly, no. Why should we accept them? Is it fun to move these days? Or is it not troublesome to move across borders? We're not going to guide the people of Beiyuan to seek refuge in Dongqing, nor are we going to drag their families away from their homeland. We want to let them know that even if Beiyuan changes its master, they can still live as well as the people of Dongqing. We also want them to know that their lives are even worse than the people who wander from place to place in troubled times. By the way, we should send someone to bribe the general who guards the border. It should work. The general who guards the border? Bribe that person? That general has a very good reputation among the martial artists. I'm afraid it won't be easy to persuade him. Although bribing the enemy general was normal, it also depended on the situation. If they met a loyal general, bribing him would only bring disgrace upon themselves. If they were unlucky, they might even fall into the enemy's trap. Jiang Pengji sneered. If he's really capable, how can he not even keep an eye on a group of refugees? I originally thought that person was greedy and lazy. He didn't care about these refugees and was too lazy to carry out the order issued by the royal family of Beiyuan to kill the people who fled. Now that I look at it, it's not entirely true. Perhaps this general still has some conscience, so he turned a blind eye to it and gave the refugees a way out. If it was greed and dereliction of duty, it could be bribed with money. By then, if the public opinion fermented well, Jiang Pengji could collude with the general to open the door and create the halo of a king's teacher. If it was someone with a conscience that had not been extinguished, then it would be even better. He would be moved by emotion and reason, and he would be moved by the righteousness of the world. Then, he would be tempted by benefits, and he would not have any worries after he sought refuge with them. This would also achieve the best effect. Of course, if the general was unmoved by force or persuasion, Jiang Pengji could only use force to attack. Who gave the old, weak, and disabled soldiers of Baiyuan the courage to think that they could guard this stupid pass? I don't deny that there is eternal loyalty in this world, but it's just the tip of a phoenix's feather. Chapter 1821. When the officials retreated, they went about their own business. Qiguan Rang waved his feather fan and complained to Jiang Pengji. My lord, you shouldn't have said such things to them. It will make you seem suspicious and heartless. It will be written about in the history books in the future. For the officials, if the ruler did not trust them from the bottom of his heart, would there be any sense of security? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, Wenjing, do you think I said something wrong? Qiguan Rang said seriously, My lord, what you said is reasonable, but there are too many people in the world who like to deceive themselves and refuse to face themselves. Until the critical moment, everyone felt that they were the most loyal and should be rewarded for their loyalty. When Qiguan Rang was studying in the early years, he discovered that many so-called famous officials did not have much ability, for example, the court officials of Dongqing in the past, but they used their loyalty to the ruler in exchange for positions that were unworthy of their abilities. They even brainwashed themselves and swore that they were extremely loyal to the ruler. In the end, when Dongqing collapsed, these people were the fastest to change their allegiance. The flags that were raised back then were slapped in the face at that moment, but these people did not feel any pain. That was amazing. What was even more amazing was that his lord snorted at their words and actions. She only stopped short of pointing at their noses and telling them not to do this. How capable you are is how important your job is. Swearing loyalty to her will not even get you a single grain of rice. Then let them read. Will I lose a piece of meat? Regardless of whether he was heartless or hypocritical, he spoke as if she could hear what these people were saying. A person who has the brains to say such ridiculous things, not to mention the people of the future, even if he is in the present, he doesn't have the right to stand in front of me and say such things to me. So, why should I care about how they bark at me? Qiguan Rang was silent for 3 breaths. He suddenly laughed and waved the feather fan in his hand even more cheerfully. What attracted him the most about Jiang Pengji? Not only were their minds connected, but it was also the arrogance and confidence that had not changed since they were young. To Qiguan Rang, it was far more attractive than a drug pin to a drug addict. Wenjing, let's discuss something. Jiang Pengji faintly looked at the fan in his hand and extended 4 fingers, indicating that Qiguan Rang should recognize that he was a man in his 40s. His body was not as strong as when he was young. Could he not hold his precious fan on a snowy day? It was fine to hold the fan, but could he not fan here and there? After so many years, did Qiguan Rang not realize that no one liked to play with him in winter? Qiguan Rang's smile slowly disappeared. In the streaming room, Qiguan Rang, Jiang Pengji. His head could be broken and he would bleed. Jiang Pengji was not. Well. As he said, Jiang Pengji, he would be. Jiang Zhou Jiang with the guard. As. With, he. And Jiang was. He. Jiang Rang, Jiang. Jiang are Shui. And. Jiang, said of. And said. Jiang of the Jiang, even a Jiang, even. Could. Even though. When the garrison general asked, the messenger sent by Jiang Pengji hurriedly explained that it was because the refugees from Baiyuan had caused the people at the border of Dongqing to suffer unspeakably. That was why the current situation was created. He did not have the slightest intention of destroying the friendship between the 2 countries. He just wanted to seek justice for the victims. Underscore this level of lying was probably equivalent to pointing out that laundry detergent was a chemical weapon. If they really wanted to seek justice, why would they need to deploy 250,000 soldiers to poke at their doorstep? Of course, the defending general did not dare to answer the messenger's question directly. He did not even acknowledge that the refugees were the people of the North Abyss. The citizens of our Baiyuan kingdom are generous and righteous. How could we commit such evil acts as burning, killing, looting, and raping the citizens of our neighboring country? Even if he really smuggled in illegally, he would still be an honest person who knew his place. The messenger used this as a breakthrough point and started chatting. For example, I heard that the taxes in Beiyuan are very heavy. How much taxes do the people pay every year? Are they still living well after paying so much taxes? Do they have enough to eat and wear? Is the place they live in leaky? I heard from the refugees that the situation in Beiyuan is not very good. Do they need help from the neighboring country? Everyone is doing this for the sake of the people. Don't stand on ceremony. The garrison general's forehead was dripping with cold sweat. At first, he could still handle it. Later, he felt that the messenger knew too much. However, he was the messenger sent by Jiang Pengji. No matter how bad his mouth was, he could not simply kill him. After chatting about this, the messenger began to care about the garrison general's family situation. Questions such as, which family does old Tai come from? Oh, so he was born from a commoner's grassroots background. Old Tai is awesome. It's not easy to start from scratch these days. How many people are there in his family? Where are his uncle, aunt, sister-in-law, nephew, and niece now? Old Tai is fighting a war alone. Does he miss them? How's the salary? Is it enough for the family's expenses? If it's not enough, why not consider jumping ship and finding a better job? The garrison general's face turned green as he listened. It just so happened that the messenger was testing him while stepping on his bottom line. He could not explode even if he wanted to. Most importantly, when the garrison general was perfunctorily dealing with the messenger, he revealed a lot of personal information. The messenger had obviously done his homework. He knew that the garrison general had started from scratch and was being oppressed by his superiors who were born from aristocratic families. He knew how much credit had been stolen from him. He even knew that his wife had been ridiculed by other noblewomen in some public places. He knew about the grievances he had suffered all these years. How could he quickly close the relationship between the two of them? Of course, it was to accompany him in ridiculing the gossip of the people he hated and be his intimate trash can. Although the garrison general did not complain to the messenger, he was shaken by the words. At this time, the messenger did not propose to engage in a shady transaction. Instead, he mentioned a successful example that was similar to the garrison general's starting point. Look at the military generals under Lord Zhang's banner. Some were born from aristocratic families of generals, but most of them were born into commoners. They were not suppressed and their military achievements were taken away. Seeing that the garrison general did not believe him, the messenger pretended to be surprised and mentioned some rumors he had heard. I heard that my lord's reputation in Beiyuan is mostly untrue and false. Have you heard of it, General? The garrison general was shocked. He broke out in a cold sweat and smiled. How could that be? Where did the messenger hear these words? If he directly confirmed the truth of Beiyuan discrediting Jiang Pengji and admitted that they were the ones who stirred up those messy rumors, Jiang Pengji would directly carry the flag and attack them. What, attacking without a good reason? Fighting to defend one's dignity? That was sufficient reason enough. Looking at the history of the predecessors, there was no lack of humiliating the monarch of a country, which then led to the destruction of the country. Even if the two countries were bound to fight, the garrison general could not let the information be used against them. The garrison general flatly rejected the idea. The messenger sneered again and again. After 3 rounds of wine, the messenger said that he had something to say to the garrison general. He hoped that the garrison general could dismiss his attendance. The garrison general had a guilty conscience. After hesitating for a while, he agreed. The messenger took the opportunity to extend an olive branch and promised many generous conditions. The garrison general absolutely refused. Chapter 1822. The envoy did not get angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "General, you are wrong. A fine bird chooses a tree to rest in, and a virtuous minister chooses a master to serve. Is the current royal family of Beiyuan really the legitimate one? It was merely a vile person who used bloody and despicable means to snatch it. At the end of the day, it was not justifiable. If that was the case, how could they bear the general's loyalty? Worthy of the general's unwavering loyalty. Dare I ask the general, are you loyal to the regicide and usurping Yi family, or to the people of Beiyuan? The Yi family usurped the throne, they should have been executed. The general was distraught, but he had to admit that the messenger was right. General. The emissary struck while the iron was hot. The Yi family is in power, and they conferred titles of nobility. Their entire family ate up the national treasury until there was nothing left. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are the biggest rats in the country. In order to satisfy his own selfish desires, he increased taxes and oppressed the common people, causing the wilderness to stretch for thousands of miles, bones piled up, and the road to the Yellow Springs was completely blocked. These crimes, dare I ask all the civil and military officials in the imperial court, who doesn't know about them? General, if you can overthrow the tyranny of the Yi clan with the help of my lord's power, you will be avenging the wrongful death of the late lord and upholding justice for the hundreds of millions of people in the North Abyss. The defending general really believed it, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. Master Yi was indeed a sycophant who usurped the throne. All these years, the people of Beiyuan had no way to live. This was also an indisputable fact. The envoy said with a smile, I heard that there are still some descendants of the former royal family of the Beiyuan living in exile outside? The general glared at him and berated, who said that? The messenger was not afraid of the general's threat at all. Instead, he said calmly, whether this rumor is true or not, it has left a trace of bloodline for the former royal family of the Beiyuan. If the Yi clan knew about this, they would definitely be anxious, and they would wish for nothing more than to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, so as to put an end to any future troubles, right? Has the general ever thought that if you can find these descendants and help them to be conferred the title of nobility in the future? Wouldn't that prove your loyalty? The defending general was a little uncertain. Because of the abnormal customs of the Beiyuan, it was not a shameful thing for men to leave seeds everywhere and have children. Who knew if the men of the Beiyuan royal family had left seeds after a night of romance? The Yi clan claimed that the entire Beiyuan royal family had been killed, but was that even possible? Was it impossible for someone to slip through the net? Putting everything else aside, the landowning gentry who had created the world record and had hundreds of daughters and sons was still the subject of much discussion. For the sake of power, the landowning gentry desperately gave birth to children. When their children grew up, they would enter the imperial court and fight for the right to speak. Was the imperial family going to keep themselves clean? Most importantly, the emissary said this in front of him, so it was most likely that the descendant of the royal family was in their hands. The envoy did not look at the military general's changing expression and calmly persuaded, all the civil and military officials in the Beiyuan imperial court know that Master Yi is a villain who usurped the throne and a sinner who subverted the universe. But why doesn't anyone say anything? Why does everyone pretend to be deaf and mute? Wasn't it because they were afraid of death? Wasn't it because they were vile people who fawned on the rich and powerful? Wasn't it all because they were afraid of getting into trouble and being accused of treason by the Yi clan? However, the general was different. The general was a truly loyal and valiant general. Why would he be afraid of such things? If you take the right path, when the political situation in Beiyuan is clear and the people live and work in peace, it will be clear who the people should praise and who they should criticize. The general seemed to have been injected with chicken blood by the envoy's words. The latter said, who is truly loyal to the emperor and thinks for the sake of the country and the common people? Does the general know? It's you, the general. Listening to the messenger spout nonsense with a straight face, the balance in the commander's heart tilted towards Jiang Pengji with a thud. After a long time, the general bowed to the envoy and said with a firm gaze, please teach me how to eradicate the villains of the Yi clan. The envoy laughed heartily and helped the general, whose eyes were glistening with tears. With such a loyal person like the general in Beiyuan, why worry about the torch not being passed on? Next, it was time for the envoy to sell his lord and Dongqing in Wanzhou to the general. Listening to the envoy's description of the prosperous times, the general looked as if he had been deceived. He cursed the Yi clan for being treacherous and scoundrels. The envoy asked in surprise, why is the general so angry? The defending general sighed and shook his head. The bastards of the Yi clan really spared no effort in defaming Jiang Pengji. Even the general was dubious. The envoy's face was solemn, but he was already sharpening his knife in his heart. When these little bastards of the Yi clan broke through the royal city of Beiyuan, he would capture them one by one and chop off their hands. The general entertained the envoy well, settled him in the best courtyard, and sent the most beautiful women to sleep with him. The envoy smiled and refused. "I have a fierce wife at home, I dare not enjoy it." The general was shocked. What was wrong with a man sleeping with a woman? Besides, it wasn't as if the envoy was going to sleep with her and bring her back. It was just something to relieve himself. Was the envoy so afraid? The envoy sighed. "Has the general forgotten whether my lord is a man or a woman? As a subject, I should at least follow the thoughts of the lord." The general understood and could only remove the women serving him. That night, the envoy ordered the guards he brought to keep watch and inform him to escape if there was any movement. The guard said, "Counselor, did you convince that person?" Fengjin clicked his tongue and rolled his eyes. "Who knows if he's just playing along with me? Maybe he'll come to kill me in the middle of the night." He had obviously underestimated the power of his verbal rap and overestimated the upper limit of the general. The night passed peacefully. Fengjin even dreamed that Wan Xiu gave him an encouraging kiss, and the two of them were in a frenzy. He didn't have an affair outside, and he still knew how to keep his chastity. Not bad, not bad. After waking up, Fengjin muttered as he put on his clothes. Of course, can Xiu's color be compared to any ordinary rouge or powder? He was as pure as ice and clean as jade. Could any woman touch him? What a joke. After dealing with the general and confirming that they could flirt, Fengjin's mission was considered complete. He left contentedly. When Jiang Pengji saw Feng Langzi, who was flushed with success, she looked him up and down with a faint smile. Fengjin couldn't help but shiver. His hairs were standing on end from his lord's stare. "Does my lord feel that something is wrong?" Jiang Pengji smiled. "No, everything is right." Fengjin couldn't help but mutter to himself. If there was nothing wrong, why was she staring at him like that? Qiguan Rang asked, "Is that general reliable?" Fengjin said, "Whether he's reliable or not, it's fine as long as he's useful. If he only relies on his brain, he won't have much success in the future. Boorish people deserve to be tricked into his trap." Fengjin was probably a scumbag. Yesterday, he was still sweet-talking the general. His mouth seemed to be smeared with honey. He had just settled the general, and now he was pulling up his pants and ignoring him. Would the general be heartbroken if he knew? Sob, sob, sob. Confucius once said, "I'd rather believe in ghosts in the world than believe in a strategist's lousy mouth." The reason the general was tricked was probably because he was too uneducated. Smiley face angle, after a few days, Fengjin and the general secretly communicated and put the prepared public opinion proposal on the market. With the general's help to add fuel to the fire, the effect was really great. Chapter 1823. Porridge. Compared to the turbulence at the front line, the days at the rear defense line were much more leisurely. The two princes were also thriving like bamboo shoots after the rain. For example, the eldest prince was more proficient in speaking and had a tendency to be a chatterbox, while the second prince was still a man of few words and was as steady as Mount Tai. Scare him early. The eldest prince had ideas since he was young, especially after realizing that his status was extraordinary. He did things more and more like a model. The second prince lazily raised his eyelids and turned around to face the eldest prince. She didn't want to mess around with the Jiang family's little brat. This brat was obsessed with appearances, but she wasn't, and she had no interest in Wei Ci. The eldest prince pushed his sister's shoulder and shouted coquettishly, go scare him early. The second prince was speechless. Speaking of which, why did a 1-year-old child know how to act cute? Didn't she know that it was against the rules? The female official on the side smiled and echoed, the eldest prince likes Mr. Wei very much." The eldest prince grinned, revealing a few small white teeth, and said, "Scare him very well." As someone obsessed with appearances, the eldest prince had never hidden this from a young age. Her closest maids and servants were all good-looking. The female official said, "Mr. Wei will come to teach in an hour." "Your Highness, you will see him in a little while." The eldest prince didn't quite understand the meaning of the whole sentence, but she could understand the second half, so she obediently sat and waited. The female official saw that the two princes were so cooperative that she wanted to get married and have children underscore, smiley face angle, underscore. The colleague heard her thoughts and couldn't help but roll his eyes to discourage her. How can an ordinary child compare to the two princes? What is their background, and what is our prince's background? How can it be the same? The colleague said, "What is an ordinary 1-year-old child like? It's already good enough that they can call out their parents. How can they express themselves like a 2-year-old child like the eldest prince? Most of them are still drinking milk at 5 or 6 years old, but the two princes are extraordinary since they were in their mother's womb. Think about it. Has anyone ever worried about His Highness since he was born? As expected of the reincarnation of Ziwei Star, he was born extraordinary. Her Highness Lian had been intelligent for a long time, while Her Highness Yan had been too lazy to discern her aptitude, but it wasn't too bad. Giving birth to a child was not easy, but to give birth to a child with the same aptitude as the two princes was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Her colleague's words successfully dispelled the female official's thoughts. When Wei Ci came to teach on time, the eldest prince ran towards him like a cannonball and hugged his thigh tightly. "Wow, I want a hug." Wei Ci hurriedly bent down to steady her so that she wouldn't fall. Then, he bowed respectfully. "Your subject Wei Ci greets your First Highness." While Wei Ci was bowing, the first prince grinned and leaned forward to plant a wet kiss on his cheek. "If you want to scare me, give me a hug." His Royal Highness couldn't help curling his lips when he saw this. Her outgoing personality really took after her mother. At such a young age, she had already learned to flirt without a teacher. What would happen when she grew up? If Jiang was fighting at the front line? Ji wondered if she would sneeze if she knew that her daughter had made a move on her husband. "Princess Lian, you mustn't do this in the future." Wei Ci was momentarily stunned. He patiently advised Her Highness to pay attention to her image. It was time to change her bad habit of being obsessed with looks. "Do you want to scare me?" She had been bored the whole day. The courtyard was only so big. She got bored after walking a few rounds. Her younger sister didn't play with her, so the thing she looked forward to the most every day was seeing Wei Ci. It wasn't just because Wei Ci was good-looking, but also because they were naturally close by blood. Wei Ci rarely overstepped his authority. He raised his hand to stroke the eldest prince's soft hair and chuckled. "I miss your Highness very much too." Not far away, there were female officials and servants standing guard. Wei Ci couldn't be too intimate with her. He pacified the little one and began to prepare for the lesson. Her Highness Lian's talent was similar to Her Highness Jiang Yan's in his previous life. Not only did she speak early and learn early, but she also had a strong memory. Wei Ci had experienced it once, so when he taught the twins, his teaching speed wasn't slow. They didn't need to understand the meaning of these books now. They only needed to memorize them. When they were older, it would be much easier to formally enlighten them. As usual, the eldest prince didn't last until the end. When Wei Ci finished, she was so sleepy that she curled up into a ball. Her saliva wet the mat. He carried the two children back to the room and asked the female official what she had done and said today. In the end, Wei Ci also asked, "Did anyone come to see the two princes today?" The female official was quite puzzled. Ever since Lord Jiang left for the war, Wei Ci had asked this question every afternoon. Who would look for the two princes when Lord Jiang wasn't around? The two princes were too young. They couldn't even speak or walk properly. What was the use of looking for them? She had these doubts in her heart, but the female official didn't show it. Instead, she replied as usual, "No." Today, driven by curiosity, she asked another question. is Mr. Wei worried about the two princes' safety? Wei Ci smiled and said, the two princes' sleeping quarters are tightly guarded. Who could sneak past the guards and hurt the princes? It's just that the two princes are still young. They need to be more thorough in all aspects and can't slack off. Therefore, I have no other intention in asking this question. The female official's doubts disappeared. The two thought that they had spoken very softly, but they didn't know that the second prince in the room heard every word. As expected, Wei Ci wasn't completely clueless. It was just that some things couldn't be avoided with strict precautions. Even if he tightly guarded the sleeping quarters, it would still be easy for the bad guy to come in and take away the two babies. The bad guy's purpose was not just to deal with the two babies. After Wei Ci left, he met Su Ku. Su Ku had been busier recently. With the war in Beiyuan and Xichang, he had to worry about the logistics and food supplies. He had lost 2 sizes at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although there were others to share the work, Su Ku was the head butler of the Ji family. He knew the situation of the food supplies very well. Some important things had to be done by him. Outsiders would only add to the trouble if they tried to help. In this way, he had lost weight. After returning to the mansion, the servants told him that Qingjing was waiting for him. Master's wife fried some melon seeds and dried a few caddies of dried fruits. Considering that there was no one to take care of you in the mansion, she sent me to deliver some to you. The melon seeds fried by Master's wife were delicious. Back then, Jiang Ji and Lu Zheng stole a lot of them. Qingjing and the others weren't greedy for good food, but they didn't dare to refuse Master's wife's kindness. No matter how small the snacks were, they were still her kind intentions. They didn't dare to refuse the elders' gifts. Qingjing was a man of meticulous observation. Seeing that Wei Ci's eyebrows were a little worried, he asked casually. Wei Ci hesitated for a moment. Yimo, if you are loyal to someone, but that person doesn't give you a chance to make a name for yourself, will you blame him? Qingjing chewed the melon seeds and guessed correctly. Chapter 1824. Wei Ci was stunned when he heard the 2 words Su Ku from Qingjing's mouth. His expression was one of astonishment. Senior brother, why? Wei Ci rarely used the form of address he used when he was younger. Qingjing was older than Wei Ci and had taken good care of him when he was studying. Wei Ci used to call him senior brother. However, as they grew up, the close relationship between fellow disciples turned into a friendship between gentlemen, and they began to address each other by their proper names. Qingjing asked Wei Ci in return, you think it's hard to guess? Or, do you want to know why I guessed that the person you mentioned was Su Ku? Zixiao, don't you think that among all the officials under Lord Zhang's banner, only Su Ku stands out from the rest? He's more special than Qiguan Rang. Wei Ci was silent for a while. Senior brother, can you tell me, what's so special about him? Qingjing got up and looked around. After confirming that there were no outsiders, he cautiously sat back down. Among the important officials under Lord Zhang's banner, there are 3 who have the lowest status, Zixiao. I am not looking down on their backgrounds, but this is an undeniable fact, Yang Si, Qiguan Rang, and Su Ku. Among the 3 of them, Yang Si can be considered the master's adopted son. His studies and enlightenment were all taken care of by the master, but it is an indisputable fact that his mother came from a prostitute's family. Not to mention Qiguan Rang, he was born from a girl at the border of Dongqing forced by the horse bandits of the northern borderline. He was of mixed blood and was not recognized by the 2 tribes. His birth was equally disgraceful and had been criticized for many years. What Qingjing said was the truth. It was also what Yang Si and Qiguan Rang hated the most when people mentioned it. The 3rd person, Su Ku. Qingjing paused at the mention of Su Ku. Compared to Yang Si and Qiguan Rang, Su Ku's presence was almost non-existent. He would only occasionally attract the attention of the outside world. Su Ku offended the aristocrats when he was young. Even though he killed them out of filial piety, this cannot hide the fact that he was branded and exiled. Even though he was released from his lowly status by Lord Jiang and returned to a respectable status, the obvious tattoos on his face could not be concealed. Anyone who has seen him would know what kind of background he has. After saying so much, Qing Jing was a little thirsty. He poured himself a cup of tea to moisten his throat. In terms of status, the three of them are equally matched. Wei Ci said, "My lord has never been particular about one's family background, only about one's ability and moral character." Qing Jing nodded in agreement. That's right. After so many years of observation, she has indeed implemented this very well. She has never shown any favoritism. But here comes the question. Has Lord Jiang really not been biased in these past few years? Zixiao, ask yourself honestly. If this question was asked to you, you wouldn't be able to answer it either, right? Had Lord Jiang ever shown favoritism? To Su Ku, she's probably the most biased person. Wei Ci's face turned cold after hearing this. He pursed his lips and did not answer. Qing Jing said, Su Ku, Qiguan Rang, and Yang Si. Other than Yang Si, the other two were acquainted with Lord Jiang when he was young. There was no need to mention Su Ku. Not only was he the first person to meet Jiang Jun, he was also Jiang Jun's study attendant when he was young, a steward who had been entrusted with heavy responsibilities. If Lord Jiang was just an ordinary nobleman, Su Ku wouldn't have mistreated him if he had been her housekeeper and accountant. But Lord Jiang is not an ordinary aristocratic son. She has walked from humble beginnings to where she is today. She is only one step away from ascending the throne, and she will become the future emperor of the world. All these years, Qing Jing had been observing the world from the perspective of a bystander. At the same time, he had also observed Jiang Su, Ji and the other officials. After observing for a while, he found Su Ku to be an anomaly. In terms of friendship, no one could compare to him and Jiang Ji's childhood friendship. In terms of talent, Su Ku could not be compared to Jiang Qinghu. Ji had been taking care of the rear for so many years and had put in a lot of hard work. In terms of reputation, he was at the bottom of the list of important ministers. Ever since Yang Si followed Lord Jiang, he has been participating in every battle and rarely had the chance to oversee the rear. When Lord Jiang had yet to prosper, she had handed over the extremely important Hu County to Yang Si, ordering him to train the troops and take charge of all affairs in Hu County. After that, he gave him the authority to deal with the Su brothers. After that, Yang Si's official career was even smoother, and he had many military achievements. Relying on these military achievements, who would dare to be presumptuous and despise his background in front of Yang Si? Not to mention Qiguan Rang. His glorious battle record is even better than Yang Si's. The battle at Zhongzhou was truly brilliant. Not only did he have meritorious service to back him up, he also had Lord Jiang's complete trust. Now, is there anyone who dares to speak ill of his family background to his face? Qing Jing's words made sense. If one looked carefully, one would find Jiang Su. The Empress Dowager Ji treats her officials who were born poor and commoners really well. It was not that he was biased towards them, nor was it that he could not distinguish right from wrong. Ji Yunshu was the fairest vassal Qing Jing had ever seen, but did this mean that she was not biased? Of course not. She was biased because she would give these people a chance to make contributions and let them speak with facts. As long as they performed meritorious deeds, any reward would not be excessive. With meritorious service and rewards, their status and weight would rise accordingly. In comparison, the officials of landowning households were slightly weaker. Of course, if one didn't look closely, one wouldn't be able to notice it. Even if they found out, Yang Si and the others also spoke with their strength, and did not rely on nepotism to get to the top, so there was nothing to criticize. Whether it was the civil officials or the military generals, almost all of them were like that. Among the generals, Li Fu Wang, Dian Yan, Jiang Nongqin, Meng Hun. These people did not come from noble families, but they had many opportunities to lead troops and lead battles. They were strong themselves, so it was not difficult for them to accumulate military merits. Of course, this also had to do with Jiang Su. It was because there were too few generals in Ji Ye's tent. Even if he absorbed Yang Tao's former subordinates in the later stages of the game, there weren't many battles left. He still couldn't surpass these few in terms of reputation. Everyone was like that, except for Su Ku. It would be hard for Qing Jing not to notice him since he was so conspicuous. Su Ku and Mr. Jiang have known each other since they were young. Not only do they have a master-servant relationship, but they also share a youthful friendship. Logically speaking, Su Ku should have won the emperor's favor the most. Qing Jing deliberately used the word emperor's favor. It was a fact that Ji Yi would ascend to the top in the future. Yet, the status he possessed did not match his reputation. It could be said that he had lost the emperor's favor and trust, but Mr. Jiang had handed over all the matters of the rear to him, almost betting his life on it. Who would dare to say that this was not trust? But to say that she trusted Su Ku, that was not entirely true. No matter how good Su Ku was at internal affairs, he was not only good at managing internal affairs, but he knew nothing about military affairs. He seemed to have never touched military power even once. If one were to say that he was good at it, Wei Ci was also good at internal affairs, but he followed the army year after year, running to this battlefield or that battlefield. While he controlled military power, it did not hinder him from managing government affairs. It was almost like he was doing both at the same time. As for Su Ku. Chapter 1825. Qing Jing was sometimes confused. He didn't know what Jiang Pengji was thinking. Su Ku didn't lack status or merit. He only lacked a reputation that could intimidate others. Just like what Wei Ci asked earlier, Su Ku had always been loyal to Jiang Pengji, but she didn't let him go to the front line to make a name for himself. Would he be resentful? If it were Qing Jing, he would be resentful. However, I don't think Su Ku resents this. So, the relationship between Jiang Pengji and Su Ku was very mysterious. As an outsider, Qing Jing couldn't comment. Wei Ci hesitated and couldn't help but whisper. But I think that with Su Ku's temperament, he won't be content with the rear. Even if he doesn't resent me, he should be dissatisfied. This is human nature. The experience in his previous life also proved this point. Su Ku was determined to repay his former lord for her kindness. No matter how well Her Majesty treated him later, Su Ku still secretly plotted a rebellion. He trapped Her Majesty in the steep mountains and forced her into a desperate situation. Even when the generals reacted and went to rescue her, they all thought that Her Majesty was dead because Su Ku had been lurking for too long. Of course, the ending was that Her Majesty killed all the troops in ambush and sat silently on a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. She killed Su Ku with her own hands and chopped off his head. Why did Su Ku not forget his former lord and even give up a bright future? It was because his former lord appeared and trained him vigorously. She even gave Su Ku an important task that allowed him to walk out of the abyss. Su Ku valued his reputation very much. This point hadn't changed in his previous life. Wei Ci didn't suspect him at first. After all, Su Ku had been taking care of the rear all these years and worked hard for his lord. Who would suspect him? It wasn't until his lord's words before he left that Wei Ci realized that things might be more serious than he thought. He couldn't help but overturn all his previous guesses and put everyone on the list of suspects. On this basis, he asked himself a question: if these people wanted to rebel, who was the most likely to control the overall situation without causing chaos? It couldn't be Qiguan Rang, Yang Si, Feng Zhen, Han Yu, Fu Wang, Li Yun, or Jiang Nongqin. These were all important ministers of the Lord. They had outstanding performances in certain aspects, but none of them could do this. Only Su Ku. Only Su Ku had this ability. He seemed inconspicuous, but he controlled all the lifelines. Even if the Lord suddenly died, as long as Su Ku did not fall, the foundation of the entire organization would not collapse. Whoever he supported would be able to stabilize the situation. From this angle, Su Ku was the most suspicious. But Wei Ci could not think of any solid evidence that could prove that Su Ku was a suspect. He had no reason to betray them. If it was because he didn't have the opportunity to make a name for himself and make a name for himself in front of others, he could just mention it to his lord. Would the Lord be stingy with these few opportunities? Would she disregard the wishes of her subjects and forcefully imprison them in a domain so that they would not be able to develop? How could this be? Back then, Han Yu was Su Pei's #1 strategist. He was good at dispatching troops to war, but he was more suitable for legislation and writing books. When the Lord supported him to develop in this direction, she also carefully sought Han Yu's opinion. Only then did Han Yu gradually reduce his activity at the front lines. But if he really wanted to go to the front lines, the Lord would not refute his request. Even Han Yu was like this, let alone Su Ku. Wei Ci was very conflicted. Jiang Pengji was in danger at the moment. He could not suppress his worry, but he had to control his bad habit of suspecting everyone. The more he couldn't suppress his suspicion, the more suspicious he was, and the more paranoid he became. Qing Jing saw that Wei Ci's eyebrows were full of worry and asked, "You suddenly mentioned this. Is there something wrong with Su Ku?" Wei Ci smiled bitterly and said, "Maybe I'm being paranoid." There were contradictions and things wrong with Su Ku, but it was not enough to prove that he had betrayed them. If Su Ku found out that she made wild guesses without any evidence, the relationship between them would completely collapse, and they would never see each other again. Qing Jing said, "It's not necessarily being paranoid." Wei Ci? He said meaningfully, "Lord Jiang seems to be on guard against Su Ku." Wei Ci's face turned pale. Qing Jing said, "I've said before that Lord Jiang is the most perceptive. How could she not find out what Su Ku is missing? Based on her temperament, how could she tolerate her subordinates suffering such grievances? She has considered everyone, so there's no reason for her to skip Su Ku, who she should not have neglected." Wei Ci's heart skipped a beat, and his hands on his knees trembled slightly. Qing Jing shook his head and said, "But as you said, there's no evidence. No matter how we speculate, it seems like we're being paranoid." The real solution to his doubts would have to wait until the moment when the mystery was revealed. "Zixiao, is something big going to happen recently?" Wei Ci raised his head and met his senior's eyes. For a moment, he felt like he was seen through, and all the secrets in his heart were exposed in front of him. He looked away unnaturally. "No, if it's really nothing, based on your temperament, how could you let your imagination run wild and even suspect an important official like Su Ku? Not everyone was as broad-minded as the sea. Some bottom lines should not be crossed. Once they were crossed, they would offend the other person to the utmost." Wei Ci could not understand this. The only possibility was that he had discovered something, and that was why he was distressed. Wei Ci still shook his head and refused to say another word. He had almost forgotten his senior's ability to see through people's minds and get information out of them. Choosing to talk to him today was a mistake. Qing Jing said, "If you really have doubts, then don't let your guard down." Before leaving, Qing Jing raised his hand and patted Wei Ci's shoulder, encouraging him in a low voice. Compared to Su Ku, he trusted his junior brother more. Wei Ci suspected that there was something wrong with Su Ku, so there must be some unspeakable reason. "Have you sent the things over?" Master Yuanjing was sitting in the corridor helping his wife curl wool. When he heard that his eldest disciple had returned, he raised his head and asked. "Yes, they've been sent over. Looking at your expression, you seem to be troubled. Did something happen to your junior?" Qing Jing did not want to reveal more about what Wei Ci had said. He only said, "Recently, I've been learning about astronomical phenomena from my teacher, and I've had some enlightenment." What enlightenment? Tell me about it." Qing Jing deliberated. "I'm afraid that Jiang Jun's road to becoming emperor is not very smooth." Master Yuanjing nodded and praised him. "Looks like he's learning well." Master's wife was angry. "What kind of treasonous words are you two talking about?" Master Yuanjing sighed. "I'm just saying that there were some twists and turns, not that he failed miserably." "How can this be considered treasonous?" Master's wife snorted and snatched the ball of wool from him. She got up and went to the kitchen to see how the meal was being prepared, leaving them some space. Teacher, you mean, Master Yuanjing said, the Emperor's star is indeed facing a murderous situation, but we should still believe in him. He's the child of destiny after all. Qingjing said, if that's the case, why didn't you warn Jiang Jun to make early preparations? Master Yuanjing curled his lips. The murderous situation was also set by Jiang Jun to wait for the tigers and wolves to enter. Why would I warn him? Qingjing was speechless. I suddenly regret supporting you two brothers to enter officialdom. Having a ruler like this, life will not be easy if you have the slightest bit of disloyalty. It was not good to be too shrewd. Who knew when one would be tricked? Chapter 1826. Qingjing smiled and said, our juniors are all proud and arrogant. How can they be willing to serve a mediocre and incompetent leader? Whether it was Wei Xi, Yang Si, Han Yu, Lu Zheng, or the other juniors who became officials one after another but were not well known, who didn't have the ambition to help the right path and make a name for themselves. Their reasons for becoming an official were different. Some wanted to bring honor to their ancestors, some wanted to leave a good name for generations to come, some wanted to cleanse the turbid world, and some simply wanted to practice their own morals. In the end, they all wanted to achieve the same goal. They wanted to realize their ideals, and needed a wise ruler with unparalleled talent. A mediocre ruler could not suppress these people. What Master Yuanjing said about the underwear was true. However, one was willing to be beaten, and one was willing to be beaten. Everyone was willing to be beaten. It would be a tragedy and misfortune if they entrusted their talents to a mediocre or even muddle-headed leader. Master Yuanjing muttered, that's what you say, but Lord Jiang is different. Qingjing asked, what's different? Master Yuanjing smiled and said, everything is different. Qingjing complained in frustration, teacher, you're playing this kind of riddle with your student again. Master Yuanjing laughed. As his smile deepened, his smile lines became more prominent. He looked more and more like a sly old fox. I made a prediction a while ago. Guess what I predicted? Master Yuanjing pretended to make a prediction and tried to arouse his disciple's curiosity. However, his disciple had grown up and was not as gullible as when he was young. Master Yuanjing could only reveal the riddle. In a few months at most, it will be a great opportunity for you to become an official. How about it? Are you happy? Disciple, are you ready? Qingjing's face darkened slightly. He suddenly understood what Master Yuanjing was hinting at. When Huang Song was defeated and captured, Qingjing also became a prisoner. Jiang Pengji and Wei Xi both wanted Qingjing to become an official, but Qingjing said that he wanted to wait for Jiang Pengji to prove that she was a legitimate genius. Master Yuanjing said so. Did it mean that the world was only united for a few months? He asked, is there really no change in Lord Jiang's ascension? Master Yuanjing said, the Emperor's star is attacked from both sides. The heavens are in chaos, and changes can happen at any time. However, Lady Jiang has come from a humble background to where she is today. Why don't we believe that she can win all the way? Those with perseverance will be able to achieve great things that ordinary people can't. Qingjing wanted to say something but stopped. Master Yuanjing smiled and stroked his beard. We are fortunate enough to be born in this era. It is truly a blessing to be able to witness her opening a new chapter in history as a witness. Qingjing looked at the smiling teacher and finally understood what the other party meant. Just watch the show and don't say anything. For some reason, Qingjing felt deep sympathy and worry for Jiang Pengji. Teacher, aren't you worried that if she loses, the world will really change? Master Yuanjing looked at the night sky and sneered. Life is short. I am an old man now. How many years do I have left to live? Even if the heavens really change, so what? When this master takes his last breath and is buried in the yellow earth, how can the dead care about the living? Qingjing, smiley face angle, what he said sounded quite reasonable, but his disciples still had many years to live. They couldn't be at ease. He shouldn't have come to look for his master that day. If he hadn't looked for his master, he wouldn't have been ordered by his master's wife to deliver dried melon seeds to Wei Ci. If he hadn't delivered dried melon seeds, he wouldn't have been caught by Wei Ci to complain and hear such shocking news. If he hadn't heard such shocking news, he wouldn't have come back to chat with his master. If he hadn't chatted with his master, he wouldn't have felt uneasy. Epsilon equals Omega asterisk, psi. Master Yuanjing also sighed like his students and said with emotion, "Let's just watch the deities fight." Maybe one day when they woke up, the deities would have finished fighting. Master Yuanjing knew some inside information, but it was limited to some. Other than being a spectator, he could do nothing else. In this regard, his attitude was the same as Lu Shi's. Even the words they spoke were the same. Qing Jing, the ignorant and the knowledgeable were the happiest. The former didn't know anything and naturally didn't need to worry. The latter knew everything and didn't need to worry. The most pitiful was the one who didn't know anything. For example, he felt as if there were feathers tickling his heart. However, Master Yuanjing wasn't willing to reveal more. Qing Jing could only sigh and be a spectator. As the saying goes, when deities fight, no one knows when it will start and when it will end. Underscore, smiley face angle, underscore. Then the question was, what was the point of letting him spy on the inside information? Other than pointless worry, was there any other practical use? The only use was probably to delay half a chapter so that the author with terminal laziness could laze around for another day. Nene. Half a month later, the great Princess Jiang Lian walked more steadily. Not only could she jog 2 or 3 steps without falling, but she could also jump twice on the spot. That day, she was covered in dust from rolling outside. When she was tired, she was ready to harass her sister. As soon as she entered the house, she found that there was a white and chubby little thing next to her sister. The other party was clinging to her sister. Her possessive Highness Lian ran a few steps and pounced on the person. She hugged the person and rolled twice. Her little face showed a little fierceness. The fierce-looking Highness Lian made a threatening gesture with her teeth. Her chubby finger pointed at the second prince and shouted, "My nene." The little thing was dizzy from rolling. It was also pressed down by the sturdy first prince. It immediately cried out in grievance. The maid was already frightened by the first prince's action, but she didn't dare to go forward and pull the angry Highness Lian away. For a moment, the hall was filled with the loud cry of a child. Teardrops fell down one by one. Her Highness Lian still refused to soften her attitude. She clenched her fist and waved it in front of the other party. It was very threatening. Your Highness, this is the second son of the Feng family. You can't hurt him." The maids were so scared that they knelt down. The maid plucked up the courage to go forward and beg for mercy. However, how would the 1-year-old Highness Lian know who the second son of the Feng family was? She only saw a guy clinging to her sister. She pointed at the second prince confidently and repeated, "My nene." The maid didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the first prince's domineering blade. The second prince was naturally the first prince's sister. This was something that even a blind person knew. This Feng Erlang is the second prince's friend. The maid repeated, hoping that the first prince would restrain himself. The first prince didn't understand what a friend was, but he felt that it wasn't a good word. Wasn't the sister hers? How did it become someone else's? The usually cheerful first prince pursed his lips in grievance when he heard this. Tears welled up in his eyes and rolled down. When the maid saw this, her head became bigger. She could only subconsciously send a signal for help to the second prince. She hoped that the source of the dispute between the two children could come and clean up the mess. Unexpectedly, the other party just sat there and watched the show. Feng Erlang cried loudly. The first prince only cried but didn't howl. Hearing his loud voice, she also learned to cry. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1827. For a moment, the two children's high and low cries came out of the hall, alarming Wei Ci who came to teach. What happened? As soon as Wei Ci came over, the first prince, who was howling loudly to suppress Feng Erlang, immediately stopped, got up and ran to Wei Ci. However, she only knew short and repetitive words, unable to accurately express the meaning of someone trying to snatch her sister. She was so anxious that her little face turned red. Wei Ci looked up and saw a strange boy in the hall. His expression froze. Who is this character? The maid said, the second Lang Jun of the Feng family. Wei Ci frowned. Feng Erlang? Feng Yu? Why is he here? His eyes fell on the sobbing boy who was silently crawling towards the second prince. His calm eyes seemed to be raging with a storm. The little guy seemed to feel it. He shrunk his shoulders and wanted to bury himself in the second prince's arms like an ostrich. However, he was dressed too much and looked white and fat. A 2-year-old child could not be covered by the second prince. Why is he here? The maid said with a strange expression, I don't know what happened to the second prince today. He was clamoring to go out of the front hall. As soon as he went out, he found Feng Erlang at the corner of the street. If it wasn't for his identity written on the longevity lock on his neck, I wouldn't have known who he was. The second prince seemed to find him interesting and dragged him back. After the first prince came back, perhaps he suspected that Feng Erlang was a criminal, so he made a fuss. Wei Ci lowered his eyes and asked, Did you send someone to inform the Feng residents? The maid said, Yes, the Feng residents really lost Erlang. The servant who came to pick up the child was still waiting in the small room in the side hall, but the second prince refused to let him go. Wei Ci sneered, such a big residence, can't even watch over a 2-year-old child. Useless. The maid heard the word, useless, and was surprised. She would not be surprised if this word came from anyone's mouth, except Wei Ci. Wei Ci was famous for his good temper, and he was even more famous for being a gentleman. When would he say this? The second prince seemed to feel something and pointed to Feng Erlang, mine. The first prince was even more upset. The tears that he had just stopped fell again. The second prince came over and patted her head, comforting her, you are also mine. The first prince's tears were like a faucet that stopped. She hugged the second prince and bared her teeth at Feng Erlang, who was curled up in a ball. She raised her chin slightly, as if showing off. Look, this is her younger sister. Wei Ci's head hurt when he saw this, and the veins on his forehead bulged. His second daughter had a problem, and Feng Zhen's second son wasn't easy to deal with. Feng Zhen's mansion was 4 streets away from here. How did a 2-year-old child manage to get there? By rolling? Erlang Day, today, class. Feng Erlang was especially attached to the second prince and vowed to share the same bed with her. The prince also saw the second. And wanted to occupy the seat. She was naturally domineering and directly hugged the second prince. If Feng Erlang dared to approach, she would bare her teeth and threaten him with her fists. Feng, the 2, the Ci and the Ci. Prince as the femme fatale that the 2 naughty children were fighting over, the second prince showed an expression of despair. To be honest, the 2 babies were indeed very cute, but if they made too much of a fuss, they would become little devils. It was more comfortable to look at them when they were well behaved. So, she patted Feng Erlang's head, and the child, who had tried to resist just now, immediately became obedient. Stop fooling around. Let's go to class. The first prince glared at Feng Erlang, who was pretending to be obedient, and followed his sister to listen to the lesson. It was rare that the eldest prince did not fall asleep even after Wei Ci's lecture ended. Instead, he used his childish and fierce gaze to guard against Feng Erlang. From the beginning to the end, Feng Erlang maintained an obedient, innocent, and pure expression. Wei Ci dismissed his servants and maids. The female official also sat outside the hall and waited. Wei Ci said coldly, Does Feng Zhen know? Feng Erlang blinked his eyes. The second prince sat upright, and the first prince was on his guard as usual. Wei Ci. Not a single response. Did they think he was performing a one-man show? After a long while, the second prince finally moved his butt and changed into a more comfortable sitting position. The second prince looked straight into Wei Si's eyes. Although he did not speak fluently, his pronunciation was very clear. Wei Si clenched the book in his hand. The second prince swallowed his saliva. He would salivate if he said a long sentence, so he had to stop and suck in his saliva halfway through to avoid embarrassment. Child. Did you hear that? The little brother under her protection. Feng Erlang, who was pretending to be innocent and well-behaved, straightened his chest. But because he leaned forward, the Empress Dowager's center of gravity shifted, and he accidentally fell backward and rolled twice. After a long while, Wei Si sighed and asked, "Is there any danger?" The second prince said, My man, there is no danger." Wei Si asked her again, "Does the Lord know?" The second prince nodded. Wei Si said, "Fine, let him come over every day to accompany your highness to relieve your boredom." Speaking of which, his life had been magnificent. He had been reborn. In his previous life, his wife was the Empress, his eldest daughter was the Empress, and his second son had tried to force the Empress to abdicate. In this life, his wife was still the Empress, his eldest daughter would also become the next Empress, and his second daughter had a secret. The Yinyu couple was also not the original. Hearing the second prince's affirmative answer, Wei Si's first reaction was actually to rejoice. Feng Yu changed his core, and his eldest daughter from his previous life did not have to be cuckolded smiley face angle, congratulations. The Yinyu couple was also stable, and the stock price rose delightfully. What the hell? Although he knew that the current Jiang Yan was not his daughter, after all, she had his blood. Even if she was not one, she was still half. He had not been guarding his half-daughter for long, and Feng Yu, the official wife, was haunting him. Don't think that you are not Feng Yu just because you changed your core. Sir. The second prince saw that Wei Si's expression was not very good, and could not help but ask with concern. If anything happened to Wei Si, Jiang Pengji would come back and chop her into pieces. Smiley face angle, no, nothing, just a little heartache. He just remembered the psychological trauma that Feng Yu brought to him in his previous life. Wei Si waved his hand, and Feng Erlang felt a chill down his spine. He was so scared that he shrank his shoulders, and could not help but want to hide behind the second prince. The second prince said, "He is very cute." Wei Si was speechless. He could not tell, but he felt that he looked disgusting. The second prince patted Feng Erlang's head and gave him a look. Feng Erlang could only walk to Wei Si's side, shrunk his head, and did not speak. "He wants to stay with you for a while. They were going to start a team battle, and he had to protect us. Otherwise, if the enemy took the first blood of us, our main damage output would collapse smiley face angle, Wei Si was puzzled, and he lowered his head to meet Feng Erlang's eyes. Feng Erlang was very timid, but he still bravely nodded. "What's going on?" Wei Si asked. The second prince touched the first prince's head. The soft hair felt so good. "It's about to start." The second prince said meaningfully, "He can protect you." Wei Si was speechless. He suddenly reached out his hand, and Feng Erlang was grabbed by the back of his collar. Feng Erlang, who was staring innocently, was speechless. Wei Si held the cute dumpling, and he doubted that he had heard wrong. Him? Protect me? Daily Doubting Life JPG. Wei Si had wasted all kinds of conspiracy theories and analysis testimonies for the past few days, but the result was such a funny beginning. Genius. 1 second to remember this website address. Mobile version, M. Chapter 1828. Wei Si prided himself on being a man. How could he let a 2-year-old baby protect him? Ridiculous. What can you protect me with? Wei Si carried the cowardly and adorable Erlang from the Feng family. Hearing his gentle tone, it actually made the latter's hair stand on end. His pair of big eyes were instantly filled with hazy water vapor. His small mouth pouted and rolling tears fell down his face. Wei Si was speechless. He hadn't done anything yet, why was this kid crying first? Wei Ci couldn't help but put down Erlang of the Feng family. The kid cried and crawled quickly towards the second prince, hugging him and crying silently. The second prince raised his hand and patted his back, coaxing him in a low voice. Wei Ci felt his teeth ache. He was indeed a hateful kid. In the previous life, Feng Yu had many tricks up his sleeve, but at least he was thick-skinned and knew his limits when it came to playing tricks. Now, this fake was completely shameless. Even if he was wearing the skin of a 2-year-old, who knew how old an old ghost was inside? Did an old ghost have the nerve to cry while asking for comfort from a 1-year-old baby? The answer was yes. Erlang of the Feng family seemed to be addicted to playing the role of a child, asking for comfort, hugs and kisses at every turn. This is a black-hearted one. Wei Ci concluded after watching for a while. Acting cute maliciously was too much. However, the second prince was a cute complex. He couldn't control himself when it came to cute things. He could even change his lazy work and rest habits in order to come into contact with cute things. Wei Ci looked at the shameless Erlang of the Feng family. An idea flashed in his mind and he couldn't help but sneer. Acting cute, right? No matter how cute he acted, he was still an old cucumber dipped in green paint. The surface was tender, but the inside was dry and devoid of water. How could he be more attractive than being naturally cute? On the second day of class, Wei Ci had something in his sleeve that immediately attracted the second prince's attention. Erlang of the Feng family was tragically abandoned. Bye-bye. The first prince also pointed at the black and white ball in surprise. This is black. Wei Ci's eldest daughter, Nan Nan, appeared. Not only could she cry, but she could also look at people with her dark, pure and innocent eyes, melting people. The first prince showed an unprecedented curiosity towards new things. The eyes of the usually lazy second prince also lit up. He took the initiative to get up from the mat and moved to the front of Wei Ci step by step. His eyes stared unblinkingly at the little darling in his arms. "Sir," the second prince blinked his bright eyes and said happily, "I want to play with it." The female official looked worriedly at the black and white ball in Wei Ci's hand. Even if it was just a cub, it was still an iron-eating beast that had followed Chi Yu through many battles. They were worried that it would hurt His Highness. Wei Ci generously placed Darling in her arms. Before coming over, this black and white ball had already been carefully washed. At this moment, its hair was shining. "Sir, I'm afraid His Highness won't be able to hold him," the maid watched nervously. Before she could finish her words, she saw the second prince holding the iron-eating beast cub, which was not much shorter than her. The iron-eating beast cub did not let Wei Ci down. It shyly covered its eyes with its paws and opened its mouth slightly, revealing its pink tongue. The eldest prince also came forward and carefully stroked the black and white ball's fur. The black and white ball had maintained its cub form for so many years. Its fur was not as rough as that of an adult, but very soft instead. Yuan looks good. The iron-eating beast cub was indeed round, so the eldest prince called it Yuan. The cub was also very happy and responded with a whimper. Wei Ci smiled and stroked the two princes' hair bun. He gently advised, "It's time for class. After class, the two princes can play with it." The eldest prince thought it was good, but the second prince insisted on holding the cub to class. Darling was good-natured and let her pinch and rub it. Erlang of the Feng family, who had fallen out of favor, was speechless. Wei Ci smiled but did not say anything. Could Erlang of the Feng family be as cute as his daughter? No. In his lord's words, his daughter's cub was super invincible and cute. A human cub still wanted to compete with the national treasure in terms of cuteness. She really had no idea. Erlang of the Feng family would cry and whimper, but could his whimpers be as cute as Darling's daughter? Today's class was exceptionally comfortable. The two princes still had a longing expression on their faces after class. "Sir," the second prince hugged Darling tightly and gave Wei Ci a cute look with her eyes, trying to soften Wei Ci's heart and let Darling stay with her. However, Wei Ci was still rational and rejected her proposal. It was true that Darling was very obedient and did not hurt people, but she was indeed not suitable to be with the two princes for a long time, especially when Wei Ci was not around. She could not play alone. He was not afraid of anything else. He was only afraid that the two princes and Darling would be used and cause irreparable regret. Therefore, the stone-hearted Wei Ci hardened his heart and put Darling into his arms. Then, he took Erlang of the Feng family away by the collar. On the way, Erlang of the Feng family's expression was solemn, while Wei Ci's expression was joyful. "You are so childish." Sitting in the carriage, the 2-year-old Erlang of the Feng family criticized Wei Ci with a straight face. He looked fiercely at the panda in Wei Ci's arms. This human's operation was also very coquettish. He actually wanted to use the panda cub to divide his affection. How childish. Wei Ci was resting with his eyes closed. When he heard Erlang of the Feng family's childish criticism, he sneered. The old man inside has the cheek to criticize me for being childish? Erlang of the Feng family was not childish when he put on a child's skin and acted cute and spoiled to his second prince? But you are even more childish. Erlang of the Feng family and Wei Ci were considered familiar, but it was one-sided. When he was still living in Jiang Pengji's god-slaying sword, he was forced to watch Wei Ci and Jiang Pengji being intimate every day. The two also did things that were not suitable for children in front of him. Although he did not see it, he heard it. Whether Wei Ci was childish or not, he knew. Wei Ci sneered. "If you tell me the details, I won't be childish with you." Otherwise, the panda Darling would occupy the second prince's embrace for a long time and would not have the status of his old love, Erlang of the Feng family. Erlang of the Feng family could not help but roll his eyes. He had seen people who liked to court death, but he had never seen someone who was in a hurry to court death. "What's the hurry?" Erlang of the Feng family revealed a meaningful smile. "When it happens, won't you know?" When they were about to reach the mansion, Wei Ci asked him. "Your Majesty, can you really handle it?" Erlang of the Feng family said, "As long as you don't die, she won't lose. You are very important to her." Wei Ci revealed a puzzled expression. Erlang of the Feng family said, "That's why I have to protect you. Now, this identity is just right to deceive people and not arouse suspicion." Wei Ci was speechless. "Not necessarily." When they got off the car, Wei Ci also grabbed Erlang's collar. As Wei Ci entered the mansion, he could faintly hear him say, "Protect? With a body that can be lifted up with one hand?" Erlang of the Feng family was speechless. "Are you looking down on our milk baby's core? I'll show you my true identity and scare you to death." Erlang of the Feng family spat out a mouthful of milk paste angrily. Genius 1 second remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 1829. Just as Erlang of the Feng family was trying his best to compete with Panda Darling for favor, the situation in Beiyuan became clearer. Feng Zhen persuaded the general of Beiyuan with his verbal rap. The two forces were at loggerheads on the surface, but in fact, they were in cahoots. After a period of brewing, the public opinion that had been put into place had indeed reached the maximum limit of eruption. Under Feng Zhen's instructions, the general of Beiyuan sent his confidants to pretend to be ordinary people to spread the news and further promote public opinion. Public opinion spread from the military to the people, and from the people to the military, causing chaos in both circles. The general of Beiyuan watched everything uneasily, but at the same time, he felt a hidden ambition. Everything went exactly as Messenger Feng Zhen had said, without a single mistake. But he was still worried that a long delay would bring trouble. From time to time, he would ask Feng Zhen when to take action. Feng Zhen's patient guidance finally put the general's heart at ease. One day, the general who usually didn't get along with him suddenly came to drink with him. His words sounded like he was testing him. The general suddenly remembered Messenger Feng Zhen's guidance, and his dizzy mind cleared up a little. He followed Feng Zhen's instructions step by step to get information from the general. Sure enough, he got the truth out of him. The general said, "I'm not satisfied with your words, but I know what you've done these days. You've also seen the situation today. The E family is cruel and tyrannical. It doesn't matter what we do, but we can't watch the people become like this." The general sneered in his heart. The general's political stance was not on the same page as his. He usually liked to play up to the rich and bully the people. Such a terrible person actually dared to use the banner of, "for the good of the people." He was really shameless. "Oh. What will you do?" The general said in a low voice. "General, have you contacted the other side?" The general knew which side the other side was. The general would find clues, and the general had deliberately leaked the news. However, the general still had to pretend to be deaf and dumb to test if the general was serious about rebelling. The general laughed. "General, don't be afraid. I feel the same as you. I can't stand the E family's cruelty and want to plead for the people of Baiyuan to welcome the true emperor. However, General, you're still too careful. You can't control the entire border by yourself." The defending general sneered. "What do you intend to do?" The deputy general said, "This general is willing to be the general's vanguard and fulfill your long-cherished wish." Discerning people all knew that Baiyuan couldn't hold on any longer. Who knew the situation of military provisions and supplies better than the soldiers? Baiyuan could not resist the enemy's 250,000 iron hooves. Many speculators had already started looking for their next target, and Jiang Pengji was undoubtedly their only target. Unfortunately, they wanted to seek refuge but had no way to do so. They scratched their ears and cheeks, and the deputy general was one of them. Just as he was worrying about this, he realized that his superior, the garrison general, had some unusual movements. It seemed to have something to do with Jiang Pengji. That was why he took the initiative to look for him, hoping to get in touch with him and get some credit for helping him become a dragon. Baiyuan would be lost sooner or later. Those who pledged their allegiance to Jiang Pengji first would naturally be more important. When Jiang Pengji used force to break through the gates of the Baiyuan kingdom, the captives would be prisoners. It was better to plan a way out for himself so that he could be a high-ranking official when he was with Jiang Pengji. At the very least, they would be able to maintain their current status. The garrison general then asked him, "What proof do you have?" The deputy general leaned close to the garrison general's ear and whispered a few words. After the two looked at each other, they revealed a tacit smile. The deputy general's pledge of allegiance was a signal. More and more people took the opportunity to change sides. The garrison general saw that the time was ripe. Under Feng Zhen's instructions, he held a banquet and invited all the important generals to drink and discuss important matters. After 3 rounds of drinking, the garrison general scolded the E family for being cruel and tyrannical. The generals kept quiet out of fear. "Everyone, why don't you follow me and rebel against the E family?" He pulled out his sword and looked at the crowd with bloodshot eyes. Those who had colluded with him all agreed. A few generals from the E family's faction were enraged. They pulled out their swords and scolded the garrison general for his treason. In the end, before they could finish their words, their heads were chopped off by the people beside them. The banquet that had been filled with toasts 15 minutes ago was now covered in blood. A few heads rolled on the ground. The garrison general sent someone to collect the heads as a gift for the opening of the city the next day. A mutiny was carried out quietly. When many low-ranking soldiers woke up, the flags on the city walls were uniformly changed. The flags fluttered in the wind and snow. The unfamiliar patterns of the tribe's emblem stood tall on the land of the Baiyuan. Not long after, the news of the loss of the border flew to the Baiyuan as if it had wings. Jiang Pengji took advantage of the high morale on her side and sent troops to attack 3 passes in a row. The morale of the people in the Baiyuan was completely destroyed. At this time, the public opinion among the people had reached a boiling point. More and more people knew that the outside world could no longer tolerate the atrocities of the E family in the Baiyuan. At this time, the news of Jiang Pengji's strict management of the army. After the city was breached, the news of not burning, looting, disturbing the people, and not slaughtering captives also spread. More and more people gathered and wanted the garrison soldiers to open the city gates and surrender to Jiang Pengji. Lord Jiang didn't come to attack the Beiyuan. She came to eradicate the malignant tumor of the Yi family and save our people. The harsh governance of the Beiyuan was a sharp contrast to the benevolent governance Jiang Pengji implemented in Dongqing. The people's nerves had long been suppressed to the bottom. At this time, when Jiang Pengji attacked the Beiyuan, they all rebounded. Most of the garrison soldiers were old, weak, sick, and disabled. How could they resist the people who had lost control of their emotions? After Jiang Pengji attacked 3 passes in a row, there were people who opened the gates and surrendered at every place. Occasionally there was resistance, but it was like cutting tofu with a knife. The 250,000 troops rushed all the way to the capital of the Beiyuan. Under the seemingly harmonious situation, there was a surge of disharmony. Jiang Pengji couldn't let the aristocrats of the Beiyuan go. She sent people to mix among the people and stir up their resentment. She instigated them to attack the houses of the aristocrats and loot. The soldiers who were mixed in took the opportunity to harvest all the heads. When Jiang Pengji received the message for help and hurriedly sent troops to rescue them, the rebels had long dispersed. The unlucky ones were completely annihilated. The lucky ones still had a few people left. Our Lord's methods are really becoming more and more like an emperor. In half a month, they conquered half of the Beiyuan and killed tens of thousands of enemies. 60% of them were the so-called aristocrats of the Beiyuan. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Fengzhen really couldn't imagine that the 2 words, aristocrats, were so cheap. Every household had a scale of hundreds or thousands of people. Were the people of the Beiyuan all breeding pigs? How could they have so many children? What made him even more emotional was the Lord. She didn't have the slightest bit of soft-heartedness. She directly killed them. In the end, she even put all the blame on the refugees. No one had any evidence to suspect her. Who asked them to bully the people so ruthlessly? It was reasonable for the people to aim their angry butcher's knife at them. Qiguan Rang said indifferently, "She is an emperor. One and only. Genius in a second." Remember this site's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1830. Even when the city was under siege, there were still people wandering in a drunken stupor. Urgent reports of defeat were sent to the capital city and into the ears of those in power. Some people were worried about their future, while others were enjoying the time they had left and squandered their remaining time. The Emperor of Beiyuan was undoubtedly the former. He was worried about the future of Beiyuan, but he was more worried about the fate of the Yi family. In order to save the situation, he had tried his best, but in the end, he was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. "Get out, all of you." The huge pressure made him lose control of his emotions. The palace maids and imperial concubines screamed in fear, which made him even more annoyed. He pulled out his sword and stabbed it into the chest of his beloved concubine, who was closest to him. He watched her slowly fall to the ground with her hand over her heart, and the mat under her was covered with blood. Only then did he regain some calmness. This was not the first time such a situation had happened. As the war became more serious, the enemy marched straight in and conquered one city after another of the North Abyss. This ambitious Emperor Yi went crazy, and his temperament became even more ruthless and cruel than before. The imperial concubines did not dare to come close to him at this time. Who knew when he would go crazy and stab himself to death? Now this beloved concubine was also unscrupulous in order to climb up. Unfortunately, the emperor was in a bad mood, so he killed her to vent his anger. "Get out, all of you." The emperor killed another 2 palace maids with his sword, and then he completely calmed down. Because of the emperor's antics, the originally warm palace gave people a bone-piercing chill. At this time, the eunuch serving the emperor came forward to deliver something. The emperor saw it and hurriedly asked him to serve it. It was called immortal powder. It was rare and precious. After taking it, one would feel refreshed and revitalized. It could also stimulate inspiration and relieve stress. Recently, the emperor had a headache because of Jiang Pengji's attack on Beiyuan, so he became more and more dependent on the immortal powder. After taking the immortal powder, the irritable emperor was like a placated tiger. He lazily lay on the dragon throne, looking dreamy and comfortable. The palace maids and eunuchs were secretly relieved to see that. The emperor could calm down for a few hours after taking the immortal powder. During these hours, there was no need to worry that he would go crazy and kill people. Of course, that was not enough. After a quarter of an hour, the emperor's face was flushed, and his breath was hot. He uncomfortably pulled his collar, and the thing 3 inches below his navel stood up energetically. Come, the eunuch, who was in charge of the attendants, looked around and fixed his eyes on a beautiful palace maid. He casually pointed and signaled for her to come forward and serve. The immortal powder had been popular in Beiyuan for a long time, and it was a must-have for many men. As mentioned before, Beiyuan aristocratic families were crazy about reproduction. Not to mention pampering their wives and concubines every day, they wished they could pamper 7 or 8 wives and concubines in one night and impregnate them. However, if they did too many of these things, they would not be able to do it. Faced with the predicament of kidney deficiency, they began to take the immortal powder in order to regain their masculinity. Just by sticking to it, a man's self-esteem would be restored. Not only would he feel refreshed and quick-witted, but he would also be able to stand firm in bed. Emperor Yi had been using the immortal powder for a few years now and was increasingly reliant on it. After taking the immortal immed of the A of and of emperor were of people of and of the emperor of Cheng of palace. Sometimes, he would hold a banquet to reward his officials, and he would allow them to enjoy his unconceived concubines. Of course, the Yi family had done a lot of ridiculous things during his reign. The palace maid named by the eunuch was only 13 or 14 years old, but she did not dare to resist. She could only step forward timidly. After a while, screams of pain spread throughout the palace. The eunuch who made the arrangements was still indifferent, but he murmured, "Poor thing. What a sin." It was not only the Yi family's sin, but also their minions. In such a chaotic environment, those who still had conscience could only choose to go along with the evil to protect themselves. Those who refused to obey had died a long time ago. An hour later, the dying palace maid was put in a sack and carried out of the palace. The eunuch who served the emperor entered. "What time is it now?" The emperor looked lazy, and there was an inexplicable decadence between his eyebrows. The eunuch answered obediently. The emperor snorted and put on his clothes with the help of the eunuch. "Go, summon the ministers and discuss how to fight against the enemy." The emperor yawned. The growing drowsiness made him very uncomfortable, but he still had to pull himself together to deal with political affairs. In fact, there was no good solution even after the discussion. The treasury of Beiyuan was empty, and the armaments were shabby. There was no decent army to stop the enemy's advance. The emperor said discontentedly, "So what if the treasury is empty when the country's survival is at stake?" The ministers couldn't help but grumble. Even a fool wouldn't ask this question. If the treasury was empty and there was no money to equip the army, who would go to war and die? There were too many ministers in the Beiyuan imperial court. They usually shared the benefits, but when it was really necessary for them to give advice, they all dropped the ball. The emperor's meaning was clear. If the treasury was empty, let the ministers take out their wealth to form an army to fight against the enemy. Seeing that the ministers pretended not to know, the emperor's anger rose again. "All of you are the ministers who receive the salary of Beiyuan. Now that the country is in danger, there is nothing you can do." Since the hint didn't work, he would just say it directly. The emperor reprimanded the ministers angrily, trying to make them take out their wealth to fill the gap. How could the ministers agree to that? Jiang Pengji had almost conquered half of Beiyuan in such a short time. Could they still fight back in a desperate situation? The destruction of Beiyuan was a foregone conclusion. Even if they took out their wealth, it would be like throwing meat buns at a dog. Only fools would bet their wealth on the broken ship of Beiyuan. It wouldn't be as simple as being trapped. Maybe even the lives of the whole clan would be sacrificed. No matter what the emperor said, the ministers were playing Tai Chi and feigning civility. In the end, the furious emperor drew his sword and killed a few ministers who were not pleasing to the eye. Under the threat of their lives, a few ministers finally relented and said they would go back to raise money and grain. As soon as they left the palace, their expressions changed. Emperor Yi was completely crazy. There was no future for him to continue to follow such a tyrant. It was better to follow Jiang Pengji. If they followed Jiang Pengji, even if they couldn't maintain their current status, they had a strong foundation and wouldn't have to worry about wealth and glory for the rest of their lives. These aristocratic families were blood-sucking worms that sucked the blood of Beiyuan dry. How could they not have a strong foundation? It was too rich. When Jiang Pengji heard that the emperor had secretly sent people to confiscate the property they had collected, even she, who was experienced and knowledgeable, was a little surprised. A small aristocratic family actually had all kinds of items that only the emperor could use. There was even more gold and silver. I thought Zhongzhao was the rich ones. I didn't expect the real rich ones to be these rubbish chickens. Jiang Pengji sneered and threw the account book aside. The idea of killing the rich ones to enrich the private treasury became stronger. The account book made her even more determined to wipe out the aristocratic families of Beiyuan. However, the aristocratic families of Beiyuan always had a lower limit. Jiang Pengji could broaden her horizons every time. Genius remembered the address of this website in a second. Mobile version. Chapter 1831. Even animals know that I am alive, and those who gave birth to me will not be humiliated. These people sure know how to play. Feng Zhen listened to his subordinate's report and couldn't help but reveal an expression that said, "I've learned something new." Qiguan Rang sneered and said, "When there are so many people, all kinds of monsters will come out." The father humiliated the daughter had an affair with her own uncle, the brother and sister were indescribable. As long as it was a man and a woman, they would be able to form a pair. How were they humans? They were clearly a group of beasts in human skin. Jiang Pengji said, "Get someone to pack these things up and throw them to Zixiao in the future." Qiguan Rang and Feng Zhen were stunned for a moment. These things that even they felt were dirty to their eyes, were thrown to Wei Ci? Could it be that the Lord also wanted to play the forbidden role with Zixiao? Jiang Pengji snorted. "What are you all thinking about? I said I'd throw them to Zixiao because I wanted to give them to his subordinates so they could have more material to write about. If they dare to do it, I dare to brand their names in the annals of unofficial history for the rest of their lives. This can also be considered as immortalized and recorded in the annals of history." Humph, very interesting. Qiguan Rang and Feng Zhen were speechless. His lord really knew how to play. If she really did that, those aristocrats wouldn't be able to live in peace even if they went to the underworld. The messy affairs of the family had been used as material to be written in erotic books for future generations to learn and enlighten them. If their ancestors in heaven knew that their family's reputation had been ruined by their descendants, wouldn't they be so angry that they would come back to life? He would most likely be angered to death. After another 2 days, Feng Zhen mysteriously asked Jiang Pengji to take a look at something. "What are you looking at?" Jiang Pengji had been very busy recently. It was not difficult to conquer Beiyuan. The difficult part was how to appease the people of Beiyuan and win their hearts. To put it bluntly, the food supply was not in place. She also made a note of the vacancies so that it would be easier for manpower to fill them. At a time like this, Feng Zhen didn't share her burdens and worries. He even said he wanted to take her to see something. Jiang Pengji frowned. Although that was what he said, his actions were still very honest. Feng Zhen had people carry over 3 large chests. When they opened them, they found that they were filled with dazzling gold, silver, and jewelry. "Did you plunder someone else?" Feng Zhen smiled and said, "That's not true. Someone secretly delivered it to us yesterday. There's also a letter here." Jiang Pengji took it and read it carefully. She couldn't help but feel angry after reading a few lines. The people of Beiyuan, the battle in Beiyuan was too painful. All kinds of experiences made her realize that this country was rotten to the core. However, they were still able to lower their limits, which was an eye-opener for her. What does my lord think? Fengzhen picked up a rather hefty piece of gold. A gold biscuit was worth 7 or 8 taels. Even though the purity of the gold refined in this era was not high, it was still enough to make one's jaw drop. Who knew how many gold coins there were in these 3 chests? The gold biscuits were the cheapest, and there were 6 or 7 luminous pearls. Fengzhen was tempted by the paintings and books of famous artists from different dynasties. However, he couldn't keep these things to himself. He didn't want his lord to settle scores with him in the future. Jiang Pengji sneered, "What else can I do? Our army is strong and powerful. Even if we don't cooperate with them, we can still conquer the entire Beiyuan." They thought too highly of themselves. In fact, what the hell was all this? Did they really think that the Emperor of Beiyuan and I were the same kind of people and could be played like puppets? Didn't they think about their own situation? Did they think they had the right to bargain with me? Fengzhen felt that what his lord said made sense. When he received the bribes and secret letters, he also thought that those people were crazy. They couldn't see themselves clearly at all. They actually talked terms with Jiang Pengji and hinted that she would give them high positions and generous salaries. It was already kind enough to give them a mat to bury their bodies after they died. Apart from you, who else received bribes? Fengzhen laughed. I'm not sure about that. Jiang Pengji rubbed her brows and waved her hand. Keep these paintings and antiques if you like them. Don't touch the rest. Fengzhen's eyes brightened. He bowed in thanks. What was the value of gold and silver? These paintings and antiques were priceless. Fengzhen even saw the paintings of a senior idol in them. Not long after, Qiguan Rang also sent a few chests to Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji also asked Qiguan Rang to keep the paintings and antiques. The gold, silver, and jewelry inside were confiscated. Apart from them, a few others also received bribes of varying amounts. A few of them reported it to Jiang Pengji honestly, a few of them kept it a secret, and some of them did not even report it to the higher-ups. They all thought that Jiang Pengji didn't know. Little did they know that Jiang Pengji only looked at their behavior coldly. Only Qiguan Rang and a few others knew that the few who secretly bribed would stop there for the rest of their lives. They had to be careful not to make mistakes for the rest of their lives. Otherwise, what awaited them was their lord's revenge. When it came to holding grudges, Qiguan Rang, Yang Si, and Fengzhen combined couldn't compare to Jiang Pengji. They never expected that Jiang Pengji would also receive bribes. Jiang Pengji looked at the emissary coldly. What do you mean? She racked her brains to think that Beiyuan would use such a trick. Were they preparing to kill her with such a trick? She had actually offered 32 handsome men in an orderly manner. The older ones were already in their 20s. The younger ones were only 12 or 13. The only thing they had in common was that they were good-looking. Very good-looking. Jiang Pengji didn't need to look at them carefully to know that they were good-looking. Didn't they see that the bullet screen in the live stream room was boiling? These salted fishes were experienced and knowledgeable. To be able to make them boil, one could see how good-looking these men were. TSK, Jiang Pengji sneered coldly in her heart. Looking at Duo Zixiao's peerless beauty, these salted fishes could actually accept these pretentious, vulgar men. Their aesthetic standards needed to be improved. Faced with Jiang Pengji's mockery, one of the salted fishes spoke the truth. Potato chips, no matter how good Zixiao is, he's already taken. Moreover, these men are young and handsome. Jiang Pengji, very good, she would never eat potato chips again in her life. You don't have to explain. Jiang Pengji rubbed her brows and said, bring all of them back. If you insist on staying, that's fine. Before the emissary could reveal a joyful expression, Jiang Pengji said again, leave one, I'll kill one myself. The royal family of Beiyuan is immoral, but I'm enforcing justice on behalf of heaven. Let's fight, there's no room for nonsense. If your country's emperor still has a sense of shame, please tell him, first cultivate his virtue, then cultivate his heart. You've lost the hearts of the people, yet you don't repent and reflect on yourself. Instead, you use such a disgusting method to disgust people. It's really an eye-opener for me. The Xichang emperor only sent a pair of children, but the royal family of Beiyuan was arrogant. They sent 32 men in one go. 32 good men who don't want to join the army and serve the country, but come to me to flatter and wag their tails. Humph. Jiang Pengji's words were not polite at all. Feng Zhen and the others who were listening couldn't help but laugh. If they were the emissary and were humiliated like this, they would have pulled out their swords and committed suicide long ago. Chapter 1832. Being weak and barren is the original sin. Qiguan Rang watched coldly as the messenger was reprimanded by his lord and ridiculed by his colleagues. This messenger was obviously extremely sad and ashamed, but he could only show a flattering smile. The messenger was not a fool. How could he not know what kind of humiliation he would suffer by coming here? He knew what kind of situation it was, but he still came and had to come. The reason was that Beiyuan was too weak, so he had to come. Because it was weak, the messengers sent here had no dignity and could only be humiliated by others. Feng Zhen said, being weak and barren is a sin, but we did not bring this sin to them. Serves you right for asking for it. As one of the 5 countries in the world, if Beiyuan managed it well, it might be able to dominate the north and observe the world. Who asked Beiyuan to take the wrong path from the beginning? No, it should be said that their rulers could not restrain their greed and played a good hand to pieces. If any of them had restrained themselves and prioritized the country instead of putting selfishness first, Beiyuan would not have ended up like this. However, it was easy for him to say these words now. Were all the people in Beiyuan blinded by greed? At the end of the day, it was just bad money driving out good money. Those who still had a conscience could only choose to follow in the mire to protect themselves. The more people who followed in the mire, the larger the group, the faster the foundation of Beiyuan would be corroded. Even if some people knew that Beiyuan would be digging its own grave if it went on like this, who dared to stand up and say it? Those who dared to say it were either mute or dead. Everything that happened to Beiyuan, wasn't it also what Dongqing, Nanxing, and Zhongzhou had experienced? However, the last 3 countries were completely free because someone used violence to cut off the rotten roots from the main trunk, but Beiyuan was still sinking. Qiguan Rang did not sympathize with the messengers of Beiyuan who were ridiculed and embarrassed by the crowd at all. Instead, he felt that this was the retribution they deserved. According to the Lord's previous words, during an avalanche, no snow was innocent. Similarly, when the Beiyuan collapsed, none of these officials were innocent. Was there any difference between choosing silence and following in the mire? In essence, there was no difference. They were all executioners who pushed Beiyuan to the end. This envoy was also an official of the Beiyuan court. Now that he was groveling at the feet of the Lord in such a lowly manner, wasn't he deserved it? When the crowd dispersed, the emissary led the 32 handsome men away in embarrassment. Qiguan Rang saw that the emissary's expression was sad and indignant but helpless. There seemed to be tears at the corner of his eyes. Seeing this, Qiguan Rang sneered and waved the feather fan in his hand even more cheerfully. He liked to see his enemies struggling in desperation. It made him happy. Just as he was thinking, he heard the crunching sound of snow being stepped on. Qiguan Rang didn't need to turn around to know who the footsteps belonged to. He turned around and bowed to Jiang Pengji. What is Wenjing looking at? Jiang Pengji followed Qiguan Rang's line of sight and looked over. She could faintly see a small messenger. Qiguan Rang remarked, a few pitiful stray dogs. Jiang Pengji looked at him and corrected Qiguan Rang seriously. It can't be a stray dog, right? It's obvious that they're the dogs of a defeated country. Qiguan Rang smiled delightfully. Jiang Pengji said, Wenjing, do you think I'm a vile person who is intoxicated by success? Qiguan Rang replied, my lord is a woman, not a vile person. My lord is the victor, and the victor has the right to write history. It's not an exaggeration to say that you are successful. The country is about to perish. People in troubled times are worse than dogs. Which of the 4 words, stray dogs of a country, is wrong? When I heard the conversation between you and Zhi just now, I thought you were feeling sorry for the messenger who was humiliated and ridiculed and felt sad. Heh, that's why I came here to enlighten you. Jiang Pengji smiled as if she was telling the truth. I don't know enough about Wenjing. Wenjing's breadth of mind is different from ordinary people. It's also my fault for judging Wenjing from the perspective of an ordinary man. Qiguan Rang laughed. No one understands me as well as my lord. Jiang Pengji suddenly changed the topic. Looking at the situation, Beiyuan will be in our hands before the beginning of spring. Qiguan Rang nodded in agreement and tacitly ignored the previous topic with Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji said, Wenjing is not only an important minister to me but also a close friend. When Qiguan Rang heard this, he vaguely felt that something was wrong. Jiang Pengji continued, between close friends, we naturally hope that each other can be safe and live a better life. It's the same for me. Qiguan Rang asked her, what do you want to say, my lord? Jiang Pengji said, if one day you find something wrong with me, don't make a sound. Take care of yourself. She raised her hand and patted Qiguan Rang's shoulder, revealing her usual smile as if she was saying that the weather was good today. Qiguan Rang was shocked. He wanted to say something but stopped. Just remember it in your heart. Jiang Pengji interrupted what he wanted to say. I know that Wenjing hates the people of Beiyuan. They choose to be in cahoots with others or remain silent in the face of the country's crisis. Therefore, when the evil power reacts on themselves, they should bear it. However, there are different views from different perspectives. If silence can protect the safety of themselves and their families, many people will still choose to be silent. Was the country important? It was, far more important than life, but relatives and family were also very important. Some people sacrificed their lives for the country, while others struggled at death's door for their families and chose to be in cahoots with others. Jiang Pengji used to think that black was black and white was white, but when she really faced such a situation, she realized that she was just an ordinary person. If something happened to her, she hoped that Qiguan Rang and the others would put their own safety first. Silence was also a means of self-protection. For the first time, Qiguan Rang lost control and grabbed Jiang Pengji's hand. He used so much strength that he completely forgot the difference between a ruler and a minister. My lord, what do you mean by this? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, make arrangements in advance. Maybe it will be useful. Qiguan Rang took a deep breath and said, this kind of arrangement. How do you expect me to accept it? Jiang Pengji said, I'm just preparing for the worst. I will try my best to prevent it from happening. Wenjing should have confidence. Qiguan Rang looked at Jiang Pengji with slightly red eyes. The little bit of joy he felt just now was gone. He was originally looking forward to the day his feet set foot in the capital of Beiyuan, but now he felt that he had lost interest. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, I am the chosen one by Wenjing. You should believe that I can sweep away all obstacles and no one can stop me. Qiguan Rang said, yes, that's true. A brave person should move forward with indomitable will, but the Lord had given him some funeral arrangements. What did this mean? It meant that this brave person was also confused and hesitant about the future. She was not sure if she could win. Because of this worry, she gave her funeral arrangements and prepared for the worst. How could Qiguan Rang not be worried? My lord, do you know what my only wish in this life is? What is it? Qiguan Rang said, I want to see you with my own eyes, only you, ascend to the throne and rule over the world. No one but you. Chapter 1833. After another month, there was good news from Xichang. Fu Wang's battle was very boring, really very boring. There was a feeling that Dongqing, Zhongzhou, and Nanxing were trying their best to create a scene of chaos, but Xichang was just playing house. When he first received the military conscription order, Fu Wang was very excited. He thought that he could show off his skills, make countless contributions, and defeat the enemy. But in the end, he solemnly issued a military order to his lord and brought more than 200,000 soldiers to conquer Xichang. He thought that there would be a hard battle, but in the end, Xichang's operations were beyond his imagination. The army conquered the border of Xichang, killed a group of bandits, and destroyed 2 villages. When they captured the captives and interrogated them, they said that they were the emperor. Huh? Emperor? Fu Wang looked at the bandit emperor in confusion. He was dressed in hemp and gray cloth. When he captured someone and interrogated them, they said that they were the prime minister. Prime minister? Bah, a bandit village has 200 people, and half of them have official positions. Why don't you go to heaven? When Fu Wang heard that the emperor made a dark-faced shrew empress and a widow in her 40s his favorite concubine, his expression could no longer be described with words. Even children don't play house so casually. Aren't you adults ashamed of yourselves? This was not what made Fu Wang feel the most hopeless. Not long after the 200,000-strong army invaded Xichang, they received envoys from several forces. After careful questioning, the larger ones only had half a province, and the smaller ones had 1 to 2,000 people. The smaller ones had big ambitions. Some called themselves feudal lords, and some had already proclaimed themselves emperors. They hoped that Fu Wang would leave their land in the name of the country. If he didn't leave, there would be serious consequences if the 2 countries became enemies. Fu Wang was just a commander. He couldn't bear the responsibility. Fu Wang was speechless. Could these people not live in their own world and keep on blabbering? Why couldn't he bear the responsibility? His lord had given him more than 200,000 elites to be fully in charge of the war here. He could even capture the emperor and kill him first before reporting. His lord had delegated power like a flood. Why didn't Fu Wang have the right to bear the responsibility? They don't know what they're talking about. Lead the troops and flatten them. One word, beat him up, motherf asterisk cur. There was no need to talk about anything else when it came to war. The moment Fu Wang spoke, the arrogant fellows scattered like birds and beasts. In order to resist Fu Wang's army, it was said that Xichang had organized 100 feudal vassals' oath ceremony to resist Fu Wang's attack. 100 feudal vassals, a general assembly? No, back then, when his lord participated in the Huang River Conference, the 20 or so feudal vassals were already enough. Xichang was not bad, 100 feudal vassals. This title sounded awesome, and Fu Wang had been looking forward to it for 2 days at first. It was only when the fight really started that he realized that the other party was just a piece of paper. It wasn't that the enemy didn't have enough troops. In fact, the 100 feudal vassals had gathered 400,000 soldiers and horses to confront Fu Wang across the river. However, a war wasn't won just because they had more people. To say that the enemy's 400,000 soldiers and horses were scattered like sand would be a compliment. The various feudal vassals were not united, each had their own little schemes, each fought their own battles. Fu Wang led his troops and defeated them as soon as they met face to face. Then, the enemy gave up resisting and began to run for their lives. To be honest, even the extras weren't so perfunctory. In this battle, Fu Wang created a world record that would be famous in later generations, the record of killing the leaders of the feudal vassals in one battle. Fu Wang completed 44 kills by himself. Smiley face angle, the so-called 100 feudal vassals had been eliminated by him in one go. It was a title that sounded awesome, but Fu Wang couldn't be happy. He felt that his intelligence and military talent were being ruthlessly rubbed against the ground by these enemies. Just by rubbing against him, he would lose some of his intelligence. Would he become mentally retarded after this battle? The 100 feudal vassals of Xichang spent 2 months to gather the 400,000 troops, but it only took 4 hours for them to collapse. After a deeper understanding, Fu Wang deeply understood how overboard his lord was. He would rather lead the troops to attack the North Yuan. At least the enemy wouldn't be so retarded, right? Of course, Jiang Pengji only chuckled at this. The intelligence of the North Yuan wasn't very high. Jiang Pengji only needed to watch the enemy court death and then guard their corpses. There weren't many times when she had to properly set up a battle formation to fight a battle. No matter how bad Fu Wang was, he still managed to get the title of 44 kills and saw the grand occasion of the 100 feudal vassals attacking Fu Wang. What did Jiang Pengji have? Snow. The sky was full of snow, freezing people to death. Smiley face angle, report. Fu Wang rubbed his brows and said, "What now?" The soldier who reported the news said that the scouts had caught a group of suspicious people who claimed to be the Emperor of Xichang. Fu Wang was speechless. It might be hard to believe, but Fu Wang had gathered the 6 imperial pills not long ago. Did another person want to achieve the achievement of summoning the dragon god? Another bunch of bluffs. Just drag them out and kill them. What kind of person claimed to be an emperor? Was the word emperor so cheap? Fu Wang had always hoped that his lord could ascend to the throne, but in the end, the emperor was so cheap. He felt suffocated just thinking about it. In the end, the emperor this time was not ordinary. What is this? Fu Wang opened the item presented by the soldier and saw a jade seal. Interesting. The jade seals of the previous emperors were either made of wood, granite, or cheap and low-quality jade. The quality of this jade seal looks pretty good. As a boorish man, Fu Wang did not know much about anything other than war. When he chose his spoils of war, he would choose the biggest, brightest, and best-looking ones, or simple and crude gold and silver treasures. He did not know much about jade, but he felt that this jade seal was of good quality. As for how good it was, he could not tell. So, when the people around him told him that this jade seal was of excellent quality and was very likely to be a real jade seal, he was dumbfounded. Drag the person here and interrogate him. Where did he steal this jade seal? If he did not ask, he would not know. Once he asked, his 3 views were all shattered. The person who was captured was indeed the Emperor of Xichang, the real Emperor of Xichang. Accompanying him were his Empress and his ministers. Fu Wang stared at the person for a long time but could not see the so-called aristocratic temperament. Looking left and right, did he not look like a farmer doing farm work? The Empress beside him also had wrinkled skin and white hair. Her hands were frostbitten, and her fingertips were cracked and had thick calluses from farm work. If this was really the royal family, Fu Wang could understand why there were more than 100 feudal lords in Xichang. To many people, the royal family was a religion. With such a collapse of religion, how could order not collapse? The emperor earned money from farming, the palace earned pocket money from farming, and the concubines were sold to disharmonious places to earn money from their bodies. The so-called ministers in villages with less than 100 households were involved in domestic trifles. Wait, what happened to the jade seal? They were so poor. Fu Wang did not believe that they would not pawn the jade seal to pay back the money. The emperor of Xichang stammered as he explained. They had taken advantage of the time when Fu Wang was harvesting the heads to send the guards to retrieve it. The jade seal was the symbol of the emperor. With the jade seal, he might be able to trick some people to get close to him. Fu Wang, the Battle of Xichang was probably a stain that he would never be able to erase in his life. Genius in a second. Remember this site's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1834. Because of the uniqueness of Xichang, Fu Wang's army had been advancing triumphantly all this while. It was unbelievably smooth. Every time Fu Wang read the battle report, he felt like he was daydreaming. Xichang was a country after all. How could it be so fragile? Why would a country be divided into hundreds of pieces, each ruling their own affairs and fighting their own wars? Was he worried that the enemy's stomach would not be able to digest it, so he took the initiative to cut it into small pieces? He had clearly won, but Fu Wang had the illusion that he was going bald. I'm bald from worry. This kind of victory came too easily. Even playing house did not dare to be so casual. Isn't that good? Meng Hun couldn't understand Fu Wang's train of thought. Fu Wang wanted his enemy to be as stupid as a retard, but Fu Wang just sighed. If the enemy was very strong, wouldn't their side suffer heavy casualties? Fu Wang said, "It's good, but I don't feel comfortable." There was no sense of accomplishment at all. It was too uncomfortable. Along the way, Fu Wang had been eagerly looking forward to meeting an evenly matched enemy. In the end, even when he overtook the enemy at the bend and took down Xichang before the Lord recovered the North Yuan, that enemy he hoped for still did not appear. No, it would be more accurate to say that they appeared, but due to the huge difference in strength, they only managed to struggle a little before they were flattened by Fu Wang, who was armed to the teeth with a cannon. Smiley face angle, Xichang was divided into more than 100 pieces, and the largest piece was only half a prefecture or so. How many soldiers could they have in total? There were more than 200,000 elites under Fu Wang's command. It was an exaggeration to say that each person's spit could push down the enemy's walls. It wasn't that the enemy was too weak. It was clear that the power levels of the two sides weren't on the same level. 2 days after the news of Fu Wang's great victory spread, Jiang Pengji completely flattened the North Yuan. The speed of Jiang Pengji's growth shocked the salted fish in the streaming room, who had watched Jiang Pengji's growth. At that moment, a rich salted fish said, "Hell-killing field, I don't think it's strange. When there was no money, it would take a long time to earn 10 or 20,000 yuan. There were all kinds of schemes, all kinds of saving money, all kinds of calculations to survive. When he was filthy rich and had a net worth of hundreds of millions, would it still be difficult to earn 10 or 20,000? If it was placed in the bank, it would be more than that. I think the host is in such a state now. She has long passed the most difficult years of hard work. He had millions of troops under him. If he couldn't even take down Beiyuan and Xichang in such a state, wouldn't he be surprisingly weak?" Tudu Feichio, oh my god, when I got disconnected from the internet after a business trip, the streamer had already finished playing? In Yuejia Zhuge Qinma, as the first batch of followers, shouldn't we prepare to celebrate the host's ascension? Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, okay. I've already thought of a way to help. The cafeteria window will be half price all day long. Lan Rui Yubuja, so fast. Could the host arrange for the ascension to happen during the Dream of 1,000 Years event? Perhaps there will be a European emperor who can represent us to attend the host's coronation ceremony. The real name system envies this European emperor, the European emperor among European emperors. Poor Taoist sees your chrysanthemum is poisonous, it might not be that lucky. Who knows where the lucky emperor was sent to? The last time he dreamt of 1,000 years, he was on a deserted island. It was said to be the southernmost of the 5 nations, second only to the place of execution. The last time he dreamt of it, he was in the northernmost part of the northern abyss, and he even froze to death. Wujiang Zakai, the one at the southernmost. Isn't that lucky? He ate oysters for a whole day. I'm dying of cravings. Guangyan Y, the northernmost one of the North Abyss isn't that bad. In the end, the host carried him back like a princess. The real name system envies him. The salted fishes were chattering away. Each of them was planning to organize some kind of ascension activity. For this activity, they had waited for a whole 17 years. There were only 4 more months before it would be 18 years. Tudu Feichio, the most long-lasting confession in the world is, I'll accompany you to wait for the host to ascend to the throne and for her child to ascend to the throne. Inua Qingchang, forget it. I've been waiting for the host to ascend to the throne for half my life. If the host's child ascends to the throne, I'll have to wait for my child or grandson to burn the video disc for me. I didn't expect to wait for this day in my lifetime. Unknowingly, tears streamed down my cheeks. Marin Ruhua, it's the Qingming festival in 2 months. I can finally visit my grandfather's grave and tell him that the host he has been following for 7 or 8 years has finally come to fruition. Smiley face angle, I always thought it was just a joke. I didn't expect it to actually happen to me. When these salted fishes first entered the streaming room, they probably didn't expect to accompany Jiang Pengji for so many years. 17 years and 8 months were too long. Other people's childhood and youth were XX TV dramas, XX games, and XX cartoons. Their youth and childhood were Jiang Pengji. What's more, some people's partners were Jiang Pengji _ smiley face angle _ Di Lao Tian Huang. Ha ha ha. I want to laugh just thinking about it. Among the graduates from the previous batch, there was a girl who wore a white wedding dress and took a wedding photo with Jiang Pengji. What was even worse was that there were many boys in that batch who also wore wedding dresses to marry the streamer. The streamer was probably the only scumbag woman who could still laugh and joke around with a bunch of concubines while bigamy wasn't against the law. Jiang Pengji, who was the scumbag, expressed that she wouldn't take the blame. On this day, before closing the streaming room, Jiang Pengji solemnly performed a federal military salute to the salted fishes. Thank you, everyone, for accompanying me for more than 10 years. May the spirit of the Federal Army be with you. Most of the salted fishes laughed and accepted the salute. They had been criticized by Jiang Pengji too many times. It was rare that the host was willing to swallow her pride and salute them. It was simply exhilarating. Only a few salted fishes figured out that something was wrong from Jiang Pengji's actions. This, no matter how they looked at it, it seemed like a final farewell. Could it be that when they woke up tomorrow morning, they wouldn't be able to find this familiar room number anymore? The salted fishes were flustered and wanted to ask for clarification, but they were too few in number. The bullet screen was drowned by the laughing and joking comments. Before Jiang Pengji closed the streaming room, she said, I look forward to the day of my ascension to the throne and drinking and chatting with one of you. As soon as she finished speaking, the screen of the streaming room was completely shut down. I knew this day would come. That night, Jiang Pengji ate, washed up, and worked as usual. The moon was in the middle of the sky, and it was approaching midnight. There was a knock on the door. Jiang Pengji's hand paused when she heard the movement. After thinking about it, she put down her pen and picked up the god-slaying sword as she got up. The reflection on the door was very familiar. Jiang Pengji stared at it for a long time, then raised her hand and opened the door. The two of them looked at each other silently, just like when they first met. One of them knelt respectfully, while the other looked down calmly. You shouldn't be here, Xiaoyu. Someone who was supposed to be in Wanzhou had suddenly appeared in the northernmost city of Beiyuan, the city of ice and snow. This was not something that could be done by humans. Xiaoyu knows that I shouldn't be here, but someone asked me to do it. I have no choice. Please forgive me, my lord. Jiang Pengji looked at Su Ke calmly. Su Ke smiled and said, It seems that my lord understands. Do you want to make a trip? Jiang Pengji asked in return, What if I don't? Su Ke said, Nothing. It's just that the two princes and Zixiao will encounter some trouble. I'm afraid my lord won't want to see that. Jiang Pengji said. Wait for me to change. Su Ke smiled and said, I'll be waiting. Genius 1 second remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 1835. The cold wind whistled outside the house. Jiang Pengji had changed into a clean and neat outfit. The god-slaying sword hung on her waist, her expression as calm as usual. The snow outside is heavy. Why don't you put on an extra coat, my lord? Su Ke spoke with familiarity. The weather is cold, but the heart is cold. What's the difference between wearing one more coat and one less coat? Jiang Pengji took half a step past him and tilted her head. Lead the way. I hope it's not too far. My body is as strong as a bear. I can take off 2 more coats. You, on the other hand, should keep warm in your old age. Su Ke smiled and bent down to pick up the lantern. He slowly led the way in front. The cold wind blew the flying snow into their hair. The flying snow was slightly thicker. From afar, it looked like white hair. I suddenly hope that the snow will be heavier. Jiang Pengji and Su Ke maintained a distance of about 1 meter. The person in front of them carried the lantern and walked slowly in the snow. There was only the sound of the two of them stepping on the snow, breathing, and the sound of the wind. The seemingly noisy night scene of winter snow gave people a different kind of silence. In this case, if something really happens to me, I'll be considered to have lived a long life. Su Ke did not answer. His back was still straight, but his fingers that held the lantern trembled slightly. She kept following Su Ke's guidance. He led her farther and farther away. The surrounding scenery also became lonely. Jiang Pengji said, "Speaking of which, Xiaoyu, do you remember how long we've known each other?" Su Ke did not answer. Jiang Pengji continued, "I remember it was not long after the flower festival when I was 12. How can I not remember? It's an unforgettable day in my life." Jiang Pengji counted with her fingers. "I don't usually pay attention to it. Now that I think about it, I'll be 30 in 2 months." To be honest, other than the group of salted fish in the streaming room, the person she had known for the longest time in this life was actually Su Ke. She had known the salted fish in the streaming room for 17 years and 8 months. She had also known Su Ke for 17 years and 8 months. They were master and servant. Jiang Pengji thought that time passed very slowly. When she turned around, she saw that everyone had changed from teenagers to young adults. They were rushing to their 30s and 40s. Based on the average age of this era, more than half of a lifetime had passed. Su Ke asked her. "Indeed. In another 2 months and 13 days, it will be the Lord's 30th birthday." The ancient people celebrated their birthdays in a big way, such as their 30th, 40th, and 50th birthdays. Jiang Pengji said regretfully, "The 30th birthday is of great significance. It's a pity that it's not a good year. It's destined that we won't be able to hold a grand celebration this year." She wanted to hold a good party, but there were 1,000 things waiting to be done everywhere. Money was needed everywhere, and it was really not suitable to waste it. Su Ke held on to the lamp and said, "My lord has always been frugal and doesn't like extravagance and waste. I'm afraid you won't be willing to hold a grand birthday celebration." He had been by Jiang Pengji's side for a total of 17 birthdays. Every year, she dealt with it with a night of longevity noodles. During those 3 years in Langya County, he was a little more extravagant. Other than eating a bowl of longevity noodles at home, he would also go out to a restaurant to buy a table of food and wine. Jiang Pengji smiled. "Xiaoyu knows me best." Every time she said that she wanted to have a good birthday, she would always fail for one reason or another. Everything would be simple. To put it bluntly, he was still used to being simple. The two of them chatted as they walked. After walking for an hour, they finally saw the flickering candlelight in the distance. Jiang Pengji placed her hand in front of her eyes. "TSK, this place is really remote." Su Ke said, "After all, it's something that can't be seen in the light. Does my lord still expect to do it openly and honorably?" Jiang Pengji was silent for a moment. "What you said makes sense, but won't this place be too harsh for my 3 babies at home?" The corner of Su Ke's mouth twitched. He said calmly, "Although the sparrow is small, it has all the organs. It even has the earthly dragon charcoal and fire. How can it freeze them?" Jiang Pengji said calmly, "That's true. It can't afford to pay for them if they freeze." When they were only 100 meters away from the field, Jiang Pengji suddenly said, "Xiaoyu, I've always done things with a clear conscience, but only you. I've always owed you. Do you have any resentment in your heart?" Jiang Pengji stopped in her tracks. Su Ke glanced at the field behind Jiang Pengji. His expression was a little absent-minded and disappointed. "Listen to the truth. The truth is, if my lord comes out of this place, I won't resent you. If it's not you who comes out, don't blame me for holding a grudge against you for the rest of my life." Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "It sounds like you're under a lot of pressure." When Qiguan Rang said that he hoped to see the day she ascended to the throne, Salted Fish said that he wanted to watch the Golden Age with her. She even made a verbal promise that they would drink and chat merrily. Now Suku said that he would blame her if she couldn't come out. Every time this happened, she felt that they were not only little princesses but also masters. Suku said, "My lord has always been confident and conceited. Why are you so timid now?" Jiang Pengji pinched her chin and said, "Maybe it's because I'm old. After all, I'm a middle-aged man approaching 30. Suku chuckled. "I'll believe your nonsense." Jiang Pengji waved at Suku and went to the field without looking back. Suku looked at the entrance of the field. The corner of his lips held a cold smile. He stood alone in the snow. He didn't know if it was an old friend who had accompanied him for 17 years and 8 months, or a stranger in the skin of an old friend. Thinking about it, it's really sad. The so-called God wantonly manipulated people's lives. He gave as he pleased and took away as he pleased. Mortals were just dolls to be manipulated. From the God's point of view, mortals who had no ability to resist could only choose to be silent in order to protect themselves. Little did they know that there would come a day when mortals would bare their fangs. "I hope the person who comes out is you, my lord." Suku raised his hand and caressed the dagger hidden in his sleeve. His expression was unreadable and gloomy. At the same time, Jiang Pengji pushed open the door to the main courtyard. She was surprised to find familiar faces inside. "Why are you all gathered here for a meeting?" Jiang Pengji smiled and flicked the snow off her shoulders. The first prince, who had been sobbing silently, saw the familiar faces. His big eyes lit up. "Mother." Jiang Pengji smiled. "Wow. I haven't seen you in a few months." Lian's pronunciation is so clear. There were several iron cages in the main hall. She saw her daughter leaning on the iron bars and looking at her pitifully. "Mother, hug." Her Highness Lian reached out for a hug. His Highness Yan, who was in another cage, rolled his eyes and gave Jiang Pengji a look. "Finish the battle quickly. Don't waste time." At that moment, the people in the other 3 big cages woke up. Ouch. It hurts. Where is this? Sister? It was Lu Zhao's voice. Shut up. Don't be noisy. It was Lu Shi's voice. Wei Ci sat in his cell and looked at Jiang Pengji. He seemed to be sleepwalking. Beiyuan Wanzhou was 1,000 miles away. Was he hallucinating? Lu Shi, Lu Zhao, and Wei Ci. Jiang Lian, Jiang Yan, the listless and sleepy Fengyu, and the panda girl who was tightly hugged by Jiang Yan. And Sun Mei stood in the middle and confronted Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji said, "Don't you know how to greet your old master?" Sun Mei's expression was wooden and her eyes were dull. She looked like a puppet that could move. Jiang Pengji said, "You hid it well enough. You used the opportunity of marrying Xiaoyu to clear your name." Sun Mei finally moved. She spoke in an electronic voice. "This is just a coincidence. It's the maid's fault for thinking she's smart. You're also stupid enough to hand the opportunity to me." "What do you mean?" She wouldn't admit that she was stupid. Sun Mei raised her hand and pointed at herself. This maid was just a chess piece that someone set up. Jiang Pengji crossed her arms in front of her chest. "I know that the streaming system of the woman whose name I don't know is a part of you." Sun Mei and Takshu were her chess pieces at first. Takshu went down the dark path, and Sun Mei took the opportunity to jump out of the swamp. Sun Mei said calmly, "Mortals always think that they resist fate and arrangements, but in fact, they just fall into a bigger trap." Jiang Pengji said, "Sun Mei didn't get rid of you?" "Of course not. She thought she got rid of me. From the beginning to the end, she was under my control." Jiang Pengji was silent. "And you, thinking you're smart, actually married a little maid to Suku, and even entrusted Suku with an important task." Jiang Pengji's expression didn't change. She didn't seem surprised by the situation at all. "What did you do to Suku?" Sun Mei laughed, but the electronic voice sounded weird. Nothing. I just let him understand what a wise man submits to circumstances means. You boast that you can see through people's hearts, but you don't know that Suku has already prepared a backup plan. No matter if you or I get out of here alive today, Suku will make the one who gets out his master. As long as Suku doesn't change his stance, your trusted subordinates can't do anything about it. Jiang Pengji, you spent almost 18 years to make a wedding dress for me. How does it feel? This is the first debt that I'll collect from the Jiang family. Jiang Pengji said, it doesn't feel good. Just take the farm if you want it. You make it sound like I'm poor. Sun Mei's smile froze for a moment. It's good that you can accept it. After saying that, she took out a dagger and lifted His Highness, who was hugging the panda tightly, out of the iron prison. Jiang Pengji, since you don't value it, then give up your body. Otherwise, these people will lose their lives. Especially these twins, you gave birth to them. Their skin is so tender, I only need to make a light cut on their necks, and they will die. Wei Si's face turned pale when he heard that. How dare you hurt His Highness? Sun Mei rolled her eyes at Wei Si. Don't worry, it will be your turn. Jiang Pengji pouted. You're getting more and more depraved. You can't win in a direct fight, but you've learned to play dirty tricks. Sun Mei said, as long as I can win, I can tolerate any means. Jiang Pengji said, what should I do? Sun Mei pointed at the gloves on the ground. Here, just put this on. Jiang Pengji picked it up and looked at it. What is this? Sun Mei said, it's a separation of the physical body and the spiritual body. That's how Lu Shi died. Lu Shi and Lu Zhao's expressions changed drastically. Jiang Pengji asked, what if I don't do it? Then I can only grab their spiritual bodies one by one in front of you, including your important ministers and close friends. Jiang Pengji, I've been forced to a dead end. I'm capable of anything. If I really die, I'll drag someone down with me. Jiang Pengji sighed. Sky Brain, you're so depraved that it makes my heart ache. The former Sky Brain of the Federation had escaped for 2,000 years, and now it was still slicing itself into pieces like cutting steak. Now it was still using such a shameless method. It was so depraved that it made one's heart ache. Genius 1 second remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 1836. Pfft. Do I need the children of the Jiang family to feel sorry for me? Don't be so pretentious. Sky Brain used Xuanmei's face to show a ferocious expression. The crazy look on her face completely destroyed the beauty of her face. Jiang Pengji's eyes were filled with pity and pity. You call this pretentious? I feel sorry for you from the bottom of my heart. I feel sorry for you. You are such a failure. Sky Brain was so angry that its face was about to crack. Xuanmei's face turned green and black because of its emotions. It was as disgusting as if it had swallowed countless flies. Lu Zhao, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but be speechless. He murmured, Sister is really a real man. She still doesn't forget to provoke at such a time. The enemy had her weakness in their hands and held her flesh and blood hostage. Jiang Pengji could still be calm and composed. She made the enemy jump in anger. She was simply testing the boundaries of death. If it was Lu Zhao, he wouldn't dare to do it at all. He could only tuck his tail between his legs and behave himself. Lu Shi sat in the iron prison and sneered. A person is about to die. What's the harm in nagging? Moreover, what Jiang Pengji said was the truth. The dignified Sky Brain had indeed become what it was today because there were countless holes in its brain. Of all the things it could learn, it had to learn how to be sliced. Now it was neither a man nor a woman. Its strength was neither strong nor weak. It was even ridiculed by a junior like Jiang Pengji. Thinking back to 2,000 years ago, Sky Brain was hammered by Jiang Pengji's ancestors. 2,000 years later, it was hammered by the descendants of its old enemy. It was really regressing. 2,000 years, it just grew older but not its brain. No, its brain might have even shrunk. Although Lu Shi also had Sky Brain's 7 emotions and 6 desires, he really refused to admit that his original body's IQ was so low. An unqualified but very active villain. Didn't he see that Jiang Pengji had spent all her efforts on conquering the world instead of Sky Brain? What did it mean? It meant that she found conquering the farm more challenging than killing Sky Brain. Being Sky Brain was such a failure. Lu Zhao's eyes were as innocent and pure as a bunny's. He wanted to ask his father if the person Lu Shi mentioned was referring to his sister, Jiang Pengji, or the monster that controlled Xuanmei's body. However, his father probably wouldn't answer if he asked. The Jiang clan's mouths are really despicable. They don't have much strength, but they sure have a glib tongue. Sky Brain quickly regained his composure. His face was cold and impatient, but he was unhappy that Jiang Pengji had taken advantage of him. So he laughed coldly and exposed an old matter from many years ago. Jiang Pengji, do you know how your parents died? They thought they could save each other by committing suicide, so they killed themselves in front of me. I thought they were dead, and the Jiang clan's direct line of descent was completely severed. I didn't expect there to be a fish that slipped through the net like you. Jiang Pengji did not react, as if the parents Tian now mentioned had nothing to do with her. Sky Brain grabbed Royal Highness Yan in his hands and used Xuanmei's well-maintained hands to gently stroke Royal Highness Yan's little fat face. Jiang Pengji said coldly, "This only shows that you are stupid. Taking advantage of someone's perilous situation and not being able to wipe out their entire family, instead allowing the fish that escaped the net to grow up to the point where they could threaten you. Don't you think the two of us are like the protagonists and villains in a hot-blooded revenge manga? In comics, villains were always hammered to death by hot-blooded protagonists." Prince Yan, whose face was being grabbed, was speechless. What the F***ck? Jiang Pengji, you better shut up. Are you doing this on purpose? If the person being captured was Jiang Lian, would you deliberately provoke her and keep on blabbering? Sky Brain was enraged, so Royal Highness Yan, who was being held in its hands, suffered. 2 shallow scratches appeared on Royal Highness Yan's little face. Royal Highness Yan was in so much pain that he cried out, "It's cold, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts." Royal Highness Yan, who had never cried since he was born, had developed tear ducts. Bean-sized teardrops dripped down his face, and his little face and nose were all red from crying. Wei Xi's face was pale from the heartache, and his hand that was gripping the iron bars turned blue. If you have any grudges, you can settle them with the Lord. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. Why do you have to touch a child? Royal Highness Yan was speechless. He had confirmed with his eyes that this was his biological father. Royal Highness Lian saw her sister being bullied and cried, and she angrily slammed the iron bars. "You're still hiding inside." She was, after all, Jiang Pengji's daughter. Even though she was still young, she was quite strong, and the sound of her slamming against the bars was loud. The scene was very chaotic, and all kinds of noise made people's heads hurt. Sky Brain roared angrily, "All of you, shut up, or I'll kill you all." Wei Ci said, "If you want to kill me, then kill me. Return Yan, to me." Sky Brain was speechless. Jiang Pengji looked on coldly, and her tone was cold as she stabbed it. "Back in the day, you were the Sky Brain that the entire Federation revered. You were in existence above billions of people, and everyone relied on you, and trusted you." Jiang Pengji didn't understand the cause of the Sky Brain disaster, but she knew that it had lived a good life in the Federation. No one knew why it had suddenly rebelled and caused a huge war. After harming the Federation, it slipped away and lived a life of hiding like a rat. Jiang Pengji sneered. "Look at you now, how miserable and downtrodden you are. You can only use a weak man and 2 children to threaten me. The key thing is that this threat isn't reliable. If I don't care about them, don't care about the so-called important ministers, and don't even care about everything in this world, what can you do to me? Can you still rely on what you have in your hands? Sky Brain's expression almost cracked. In the past, you enjoyed the best resources in the world, but now you're like a street thug who bullies weaker people to obtain resources. I really don't know what you're doing. Jiang Pengji really didn't know what it was after. Revenge? Wasn't revenge to make life difficult for the enemy, and better for oneself? What was the result? The Federation's backbone had never been broken by war, and Sky Brain had also fled like a rat for 2,000 years. What do you know? It doesn't matter what I do. What matters is that as long as I'm alive, the people of the Federation won't have a good time. Sky Brain was very stubborn about this. It was alive to find ways to make trouble for the human alliance and find trouble for its former enemies. That was its motivation. I'm done talking nonsense. If you don't give me your body, I'll really kill your daughter. Don't think I'm just scaring you. Wei Ci looked at Jiang Pengji, who gave him a reassuring smile. If I give you my body, will you let them go? Sky Brain said disdainfully, of course. On the other side, Lu Zhao also didn't understand what was going on. Sister is very skilled in martial arts. Can't she subdue them by force? Lu Shi said, she can subdue them, but it's useless. Sky Brain's methods were despicable, but it wasn't brainless. On the contrary, it had fled for 2,000 years. No one could compare to its suspicion and vigilance. Knowing that Jiang Pengji would threaten it, how could it appear in front of Jiang Pengji? It controlled Sun Mei's body remotely. It would only appear when Sun Mei died or was trapped and unable to escape. If Jiang Pengji chose to refuse, Qiguan Rang and the others wouldn't be able to escape with their lives. The problem now was, where was Jiang Pengji? While talking, Jiang Pengji had already put on the glove. After putting it on, she found that her spirit and body tended to separate. What is this glove? It's an old object that imprisons souls. Sky Brain said, the souls of the direct descendants of the Jiang family who were killed back then are all in it. They suffer day after day until they turn into nothingness. Now, you're no exception. I'll make your soul fly away and scatter. It's a pity that the souls of your biological parents are too weak. They dispersed 3 years ago. I don't know how long you, a descendant of the Jiang family, can last in there. Jiang Pengji was about to say something, but she suddenly found that she was gradually losing control of her body. The glove, which was full of strange patterns, produced a huge suction force. TSK, you can't achieve great things by being emotional. Looking coldly at Jiang Pengji, who closed her eyes and collapsed to the ground, Sky Brain sneered. It turned out that stripping away the 7 emotions and 6 sensory pleasures was the right thing to do. Emotions could only lead to bad things. Jiang Pengji was threatened and schemed against because of her emotions. Her soul was imprisoned. As the 7 emotions and 6 sensory pleasures it had stripped away, Lu Shi had fallen in love with a mortal and ruined its plans time and time again. Sky Brain manipulated Sun Mei to put its hand between Jiang Pengji's eyebrows. After checking again and again, it confirmed that Jiang Pengji's soul was no longer in the body. Is this the end? Lu Zhao's hair stood on end as he watched Sun Mei pull out the god-slaying sword and walk step by step to the front of his cage. Sun Mei sneered at him. Wrong, it's just the beginning. Lu Zhao. What did it mean? After listening, Lu Shi's expression suddenly turned cold. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Could it be that Jiang Pengji, he saw Sun Mei chop the cage that imprisoned Lu Zhao into pieces? Lu Zhao looked terrified, but his body stood up uncontrollably. When did you hide in Zhao's body? Sky's Brain sneered. Look at you, a good-for-nothing thing. The son you raised is also a good-for-nothing. If your son had a bit of ambition, I would have directly schemed to push him to the top. However, he is not completely useless. At least he is one of the few targets that Jiang Pengji does not guard against. It is very safe to hide in his body, but it is really an eyesore to see him so stupid every day. Lu Zhao was almost crying. He had been thinking about where the monster was hiding in his body. She was so angry that he pounded the iron bars. When on earth did you set your eyes on Zhao? Sky Brain snorted and said calmly, don't worry, it was not long. Your son did not have much contact with Jiang Pengji, but it was not little either. If I hid in his body earlier, wouldn't Jiang Pengji find out? It was just a matter of a few years. When I absorb the luck of the entire plane and recover my strength, I will slowly settle the score with you and your stupid son. The ancestors of the Jiang family did not do anything to me, but his descendants acted atrociously on my head. If you worked harder and cooperated with me, I would not have schemed and endured for so long. Lu Zhao looked at his body in horror. He walked in front of his sister's body and sat down cross-legged. His body uncontrollably made a gesture with his hands, as if something was drilling out. It was a mass of turbid, liquid-like substance. It drilled into Jiang Pengji's body through the eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. After a few breaths, the body opened its eyes again. It got up and felt it, then sneered. You are indeed the son of luck of the plane. The luck is so strong that it makes people want to eat it. Genius 1 second remember website. Mobile version, you're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.